I want to welcome you to the Retro Rogues Live. Please pay attention to our warning graphic. It says the Retro Rogues Live show is intended for an adult audience and not intended for children under the age of 13. Parental discretion is advised. Again, I want to welcome you here to the show. My name is Dave Beatty. I am one of your hosts. I will be hiding behind my avatar because I'm really tired, and you shouldn't have to be subjected to that because I have a face for radio to begin with. But enough about that. Again, I am one of your hosts. For those who may not be familiar with me, for nearly the last 30 years, I have been a professional illustrator and graphic designer, worked on a lot of fun things that some people have heard of, such things such as Justice League of America, Batman Incorporated, and even some things that some people still haven't heard of, like Grifter. But enough about that. I want to welcome back my co-host. This is Mr. Eric Alexander. Eric, please hopefully don't hopefully, but please tell the folks who watch or listening at home some of the fun things that you have worked on as a creative professional.
Yes, my name is Eric Alexander, also known as Bass God 14. That is Bass God 14, not Bass God 14. That's Bass God, like a bass guitar. And I am the co-host of Retro Rogues Live, and I am also the associate producer of the feature film Occupants, which features Star Trek Voyager actor Robert Picardo and is currently streaming for free on Tubi. And I am also the co-producer and co-director of a short film that should be hopefully coming to a film festival near you, as far as film festivals are going right now, called Connection Established. And we actually do have some folks already in the chat, which is awesome. One of them is my partner on this film. That's Matt from Portronics Films. He was saying, is anybody out there? We are out there, Matt. And Manasan is out there. Manasan, it's always good to see you. Hiya, right back at you. And then on Facebook, James is out there. He says, no hiding, Dave. No hiding.
Well, unfortunately, I am going to hide. But
your public is asking for you, Dave. They're asking for you.
See, the one thing I didn't say in my intro is that I am also now the proud owner of a new T-shirt printing company as well. So that's why I'm so tired. I think I had 3 hours of sleep last night. So it's been fun and exhausting, but it's also very exciting. I'll definitely be on cam next week because hopefully we'll have some fun things to show off and to talk more about as far as that's concerned. But for those of you interested in getting any Retro Rogues merch, your location, and it's now KirbyTees.com. So there's a fun place for you to go, and you can hopefully check that out. And hopefully we'll be announcing some other things such as masks for those of us who want to wear masks. And then obviously T-shirts and all kinds of other fun things. But there you go.
Is there a link to Kirby Tees on DaveBeatty.com?
You know, it's funny because I don't think there is yet, because I don't think I've actually done like a blog update yet. Because for those people who don't know, in addition to being the owner of Kirby Tees, I am also the guy who makes all the shirts. I do everything at Kirby Tees right now. So when I say I'm tired, I'm not kidding. I am tired.
Is that right? Is that how it's spelled?
That's it. That's it.
Kirby Tees.
Kirby Tees.
KIRBYTS.com. Correct?
Yep, that's it.
Okay, I just literally put that banner up there.
Oh, okay, cool.
So,
cool.
But hopefully, Dave, you will get a link on your main site as well for Kirby Tees,
yes.
right? That'll be upcoming, but it's not live right now. So, folks, if you want to get official Retro Rogues merch, that is the source, Kirby Tees. That's the official source for Retro Rogues t-shirts. So please give it check it out. It doesn't cost you anything to check it out. So give it a look.
Yeah, very cool. And yeah, the Kirby Tees site is live. Everything on there works. I just I haven't wrote a blog post or put any links actually on the main site yet, unfortunately. But yeah, but that hopefully I'll get that done here pretty soon.
Awesome.
All right. Go ahead.
Oh, we have some comments here. James isn't letting up on this. He says, Eric ain't hiding, Dave. That's right. I'm not hiding, am I? And Jane, she's here. We always appreciate you being here. So we wanted to give her a shout out. And James says, you're wearing a mask now, hence his hiding.
Right. Y'all are killing me with that.
And James is asking if your mom is going to get a free T-shirt or mask. I'm not sure if he means a mask or a T-shirt, but he is asking.
Well, here's the funny thing. My mom's a big supporter of everything I do. My mom has actually already bought a Retro Rogue shirt.
Awesome.
She was the first person to buy one actually off the website, which was
awesome.
Very nice of her. And she's going to be getting more than just that Retro Rogue shirt. I'm sure she's well aware of that. So, awesome. But yeah, she'll be getting one for free. And hers is actually going to get reprinted because when I was looking at it, it looks a little too crooked. So I'm actually going to reprint her shirt too. So
awesome. All
right.
It is a process, right, Dave? So people might not realize. I mean, you're doing this all yourself. This is your baby, from start to finish. So
yeah, I'm doing it all. And the thing is, it's like I have mail orders I still need to get in the mail, and I've got the system set up, but it's the stupidest thing in the world. I can't get my stupid inkjet printer, my Epson, to print labels is literally clogged so bad I can't get it to work. So I'm on the verge of breaking down and having somebody print the labels. But all kinds of packages are going out very soon. I know I owe James some sketch cards, for example, but all these things are getting in the mail very soon. And again, I apologize. I just it's been a lot to take on. And James is saying if my mom gets a family discount. James wants to know, what is the coupon code for the family discount? I will do you one better, James. I'll do you one better. I'll talk with Eric and maybe we'll come up with like a Retro Rogues discount code or something.
Yeah.
Oh, my mom says the code word is mom.
There we go. There it is. That's the code word.
All right. Well, there you go. All right. Very cool. All right. So do we want to get into our main topic here?
Well, Chris Roberts is in the house, and he's saying hi to everybody. He says, hello, everyone. How is everyone doing? I'm doing well, Chris. Dave, how you doing?
I have established that I am doing well, but very tired.
Right on. Cool.
All right. Very cool. All right. So we're going to start off the top of the show here. We're talking about the second episode of Warrior Nun on Netflix. Are you watching Warrior Nun? That is the question I have for everyone in the Rogues Gallery this evening. So yes, we're talking about the second episode of Warrior Nun while my dogs go nuts in the background. This episode is titled Proverbs 31:25. I find this to be a curious show. We actually watched episode 2 based on the fact that Eric and I found episode 1 interesting, so we figured we would carry it over. We have some other things coming up that may take its place, though, because we got some other shows we might be looking at. But anyhow, let's go ahead and get into it. So let's start off with general impressions of the second episode of Warrior Nun on Netflix. I created this graphic specifically to illustrate an idea. I have the comic in the center, and on either side, I have 2 of our main characters from the first 2 episodes of Warrior Nun. And what I'm trying to illustrate is the divide from what I thought this was going to be versus what it is. I quite enjoyed the first episode, and I did enjoy the second episode, but I'm not sure how into continuing to push through with Warrior Nun that I'm willing. I'm not sure how willing I am. How's that? So there's my hot take. I'm not sure how willing I am to continue with Warrior Nun after episode 2. It wasn't bad at all, but that's a general impression. I'm on the fence. Eric was on the fence last episode, but willing to give it a shot. So now I'm on the fence. So tell me, Eric, what were your initial impressions of the second episode of Warrior Nun?
Well, it's a little bit mixed for me, I would say. I'm trying to organize my thoughts a little bit coherently without giving away spoilers, because I don't want to get into spoilers right off the bat. We always try to start out with sort of general impressions. So my general impression is that I think it was better than the first episode, because, as you mentioned, I was very much on the fence. I would say I wasn't even really on the fence. I would say I was more like right on the fence, but sort of on the bad side of the fence, where I was like, if you hadn't expressed interest in reviewing another episode, and we did get a comment from the Rogues Gallery where someone was interested in having us continue to review the series. If it wasn't for that, I was like, I don't think I would watch the second episode, just on my own. But I do feel a little bit more favorable about the second episode, to be honest, simply because I think it set up more of the players. And I thought they did something interesting in adding another player. So obviously with this show, it's not a spoiler thing to say we've got warrior nuns and obviously demons, right? We've got warrior nuns on one side, demons on the other. Ava's kind of in between right now because she's not a warrior nun yet. She just has, she basically has acquired her powers through other means, So because I don't want to get too spoiler centric, but at this point in the show, she's not technically a warrior nun yet, but we do have the warrior nuns, and they are fighting these demons and things like that, the supernatural. But what was interesting, I thought, in the second episode is now we have a new player, which apparently is like the corporate world, so, some big international corporation. And that setup to me was probably the most intriguing thing out of the second episode for me, adding that additional player, because it's not like it hasn't really been done before, but I thought to me it was interesting. That new player to me was interesting. What did you think, Dave?
Well, I thought it was interesting because of kind of the setup of how we're introduced into the corporate player and sort of what they're doing. It had it kind of reminded me of, in a weird way, without getting into spoilers, it kind of reminded me of that scene in Spider-Man 2 where they all show up for the press conference and Doc Ock has he's got the arms and he's showing how to manipulate the I forget what it is, like since the last time I've seen Spider-Man 2, I can't remember what it's called, but they have that that power source that might be, the power of the sun in the palm of my hands. I forget what they're calling it, but it reminded me of that, where there's sort of that dog and pony show kind of thing, and they're unveiling this thing, and that was really interesting. And like I said, it's not that I disliked Warrior Nun, but in a weird way, because of our retro review thing, I realized, man, this thing's taking its time. Does that make sense?
Yep. No, that makes a lot of sense. We talked about sort of the lack of action in the first episode, and in this one, there was kind of a lack of action too. There really wasn't a whole lot up until the end of the episode. There really wasn't a lot of action at all.
Yeah, and that was kind of my thing. It was because it was weird, because after last week's show, Eric and I discussed what to do for this week's show. We'd already said on the air we're going to do the second episode of Warrior Nun, and we were trying to figure out what our retro review would be. And then I talked about how there were aspects of Warrior Nun that reminded me of other things. And I talked about Blade and a few other things. And then that kind of helped us to land on Underworld, right, as being our retro review, retro rogue. I forget what we're calling it. Anyhow, it ends up being our retrospective review.
Our Rogues Retrospective.
There you go. Thank you. So it ended up being our Rogues Retrospective. And what was interesting about it, in hindsight, is watching Underworld. Man, they get going from the jump. And it's action and it's fun. But I'm getting too far into Underworld. But anyhow, the point being is that contrasting Underworld with Warrior Nun and what I was expecting, it's not quite what, because I thought we would be in a more actiony, let's get in the outfit, let's train, I thought we'd already be there with the second episode, and we're still not there at the end of the second episode. So that was sort of my hang up. It's not that it's bad, it's just that it's like, wow, we are taking our time. And again, the graphic for this episode, you can see it in the background actually right now. I was trying to showcase the difference between these two different shows. You've got Selene in the water with a bunch of other warriors. They got shotguns. They're clearly on the hunt. It's actiony. And then we have our main character from Warrior Nun, who's in a nightclub in an outfit.
Right.
It's again to try and highlight, because I really thought we'd be in an outfit, and because she's already got abilities. Have they I can't remember. Are they calling? Well, that's a spoiler thing. We can't get into that just yet. But anyhow, that's my hot take. It's not that it's bad. It's just, holy cow, they're taking their time. I mean, if Eric is intrigued enough to do a third episode, I'll go along with third episode. But it's not like it's something I desperately need to watch, because I feel like that it's more. How do I put this? It's more teen drama than really action adventure.
That's a good characterization right now. It really is. It really is.
Yeah, it's weird because it's like I have a friend who's a friend of the show, and she loves Riverdale, and she's constantly talking about Riverdale. And that's what I felt like. It's like, this feels more like, Riverdale, than what I thought it was. I mean, with a little bit of,
you got it right here. This angsty relationship that's going on, that I'm kind of like, why do I care?
Right. And then somewhere in the midst of all this is the comic that inspired it, because all those elements are in the show still, but they're kind of in the background to this relationship that's forming. And you never know, there might be something really interesting they're going to do with the relationship, because I originally thought that what they were going to do is going to turn out that the dude was like some kind of a demon, or he's part of a crew that hunts the nuns or whatever. Like, I thought it, kind of like we're getting an Underworld, which again, I'm skipping ahead, but I kind of thought we were going to get that kind of idea. So then the way that it's playing out, I'm like, wow, it really is kind of just like Riverdale right now. So that's my whole hot take. So
I want to put it out there to the Rogues Gallery, for folks out there. If you do want us to continue reviewing this, please let us know. We're not going to get into spoilers quite yet, but if you want us to continue to review this show, please let us know. We do have a comment from James, where he mentioned that he's not watching it because it doesn't have a Netflix. And I understand that. Sometimes when things are behind a paywall, it's difficult. We're going to be reviewing Lower Decks in August. And, that's CBS All Access. I currently don't even have CBS All Access. I'm just going to get it for the show, just so I can review it. So I do understand those kind of concerns. That is one of the reasons we try to do like things on Tubi, Crackle, the free things. We're actually going to be talking about Peacock later in the Streaming Wars segment, because Peacock came out today. So, and that's a free service as well. So keep that stuff in mind. We always want to take suggestions from the Rogues Gallery as far as, what we should review. And Man of Sand has a good comment here. He says, ha, a bit of YA in there, a la Twilight. Now, I don't know what the reference is to YA. Do you know what that is, Dave?
Yeah, it's young adult, like young adult fiction.
Oh, young adult. And he also says, or Buffy. You know what I mean? And Man of Sand, I think you're kind of hitting the nail on the head right there. Warrior Nun really is kind of Twilight-y, Twilight-y and Buffy-ish in a lot of ways, I think. And although I would say Buffy had more action than this one has so far, so there is that contrast. But I did want to go back to the source material. I mentioned on the last episode, Warrior Nun was not a comic that I really got into. I was aware of it because it's a very striking image of the Warrior Nun. The original Warrior Nun had a very sexy outfit. And we talked about how she was sort of a product of her era. That was back when Witchblade was really popular, when Lady Death first came out. And you had these really sexy, vampy, buxom kind of heroines and kind of anti-heroes. And that they're part of that era. And Warrior Nun was part of that era. And I grew up in a very strict Catholic, upbringing. I went to Catholic high school and all that kind of stuff. I even went to a Catholic university, University of Portland, for a semester. And so, I was kind of ingrained in that. And I almost thought it was kind of like sacrilegious, the imagery. So I've been trying to kind of catch up and try to, get into Warrior Nun comics so I could kind of compare the source material to the show. So I went out to Drawn to Comics, which is a comic book store in Glendale, Arizona. Really good store. If any of you are in the Phoenix metro area or visit the Phoenix metro area, Drawn to Comics in downtown Glendale is an awesome, awesome comic book store. But kind of disappointing when I went in there. They told me that I guess because, Warrior Nun was an independent comic, from Antarctic Press. I guess their print runs weren't that high, so they really didn't have any back issues. The only thing I could find as far as back issues was a spin-off, and it's called Warrior Nun Lazarus. So I'm gonna kind of put myself up there so you can kind of see this. And this is actually a zero issue that came out in 2006. And what this actually is a reboot of Warrior Nun. So what they did was they sort of reimagined it, and they made it more into like this. It's kind of like, you can kind of tell they made it more into like a covert ops team. In fact, it's like called like the Vatican Special Service or something like that. So it's supposed to be kind of like the Vatican Special Forces. So they kind of changed the premise a little bit. The art style is definitely different. It is pretty contemporary to that, I guess, mid 2000s. This came out again like 2006, April 2006, and this is the zero issue. It was the only thing they had as far as back issues. So it wasn't even from the original run in the 90s, because Warrior Nun came out in 1994. I couldn't find any of that, but there's a new comic bout, and I didn't know this. And Dave, I don't think we're talking off the air. I don't think you knew this either. So Avatar Press has apparently taken over the Warrior Nun franchise, and this very much looks like Thanos, doesn't it, Dave? This reminds me a lot of Thanos, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's the I guess that's the Holy Gauntlet instead of Infinity Gauntlet.
So, and this is called Warrior Nun Dora. So it's not Ava. It's not the girl in the series. This doesn't seem to tie into the series at all. Although obviously this being #1 issue and it just came out, obviously they're trying to exploit, the TV show, the Netflix series, so that they can make some comics. And we didn't realize, Dave and I were talking off there, we didn't realize Avatar had the license, because as far as I know, Antarctic Press does still exist. But it looks like Avatar has either acquired the license or acquired the property for comics, which is interesting. Now, this particular story, I don't know how I felt about it. It kind of actually was more teen angst stuff. It really is. So I wasn't that impressed with the original story, just because I'm kind of sick of that stuff, and it's just not my thing. But the really cool thing about this is after you get past the new story, they actually have a reprint of some of the original stuff. And that's an original image right there of Warrior Nun. So I thought that was kind of cool. So they actually have some reprinted material in this issue. You can see kind of the classic Warrior Nun look there. I'm having difficulty getting it in frame. There you go. Pretty good image there, I would say. And that's what I was talking about. That's what the original Warrior Nun looked like. Very, very sexy, and also kind of sacrilegious in a way. Yeah, they have like a whole little story here, I guess, from the 90s with the original artwork. In fact, there is some artwork here from the creator, from Dunn. I can't remember his first name. There's actually
Ben Dunn.
Ben Dunn. There's actually artwork in here that he did. They also have this kind of interesting story in here that apparently was never printed. It's called Warrior Nun Frenzy #1, and it says an amazing, fully painted story from Assad Ribic 20 years ago. The story was never finished, but the art is so lovely, we wanted to share part 1 of 2. So they actually have an unprinted story of, like, I guess from, it says 20 years ago. So that's kind of cool. So there are some advantages. Like I said, I don't know. I didn't like the original story that much, just because, again, it's kind of got a similar setup to the series in terms of the angsty teenager thing, and the teenage rebellion or whatever. And I'm just kind of like, yeah, I've got kids, so yeah, I'm kind of living through that right now. I don't really need it in my entertainment. You know what I mean? So I've got young daughters, so I don't really need that in my entertainment. I'm living it right now. But I do want to say that this has some cool material as far as the back issue stuff. So I would recommend this, by the way. It retails for $6, $5.99. But I would recommend it simply for the original material. And also, this has a massive number of covers. It's like got 6 different alternate covers. And Drawn to Comics had all of them. I was like, that's crazy. It has literally 6 alternate covers.
Well, that's part of the thing with how sometimes they're selling comics now. It is with all the various covers. I know that with Red Skirts #1, that there are two covers. There's the standard edition cover, and then we did a very limited numbered print run of issue 1 that only had 50 copies only, and that one had the motion picture sort of homage cover, if you will. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of like part of the thing now. A lot of times certain stores will have their own cover, besides just whatever's available, commercially for
Right.
stores to order. Sometimes stores essentially can sign a deal or a contract, and based on their order numbers and what they're willing to do, they can have their own exclusive cover as well.
And to be fair, the comic that Dave and I did, the Occupants comic tie-on, we actually had 3 covers. We had, a standard cover, and then we had an alternate art cover, and then we had a direct movie tie-in cover, that was basically like the poster for the movie. So, we're not beyond that kind of stuff ourselves, but I thought 6 was kind of crazy. And I thought it was really interesting that Drawn to Comics had all of them, because a lot of times you don't see that. Like, I was looking when we were doing our Picard reviews and we did the Picard comic, I was looking for the actual photo covers, and I couldn't find them. And that comic was really hard to find, even just the standard cover. But the alternate covers were like impossible to find, the photo covers. And that's really actually what I wanted. But I couldn't find them. I did want to acknowledge that Orville Nation is in the house. And he says that, I'm sorry, I got kind of caught up in this in the feed here. But he says, hey, he's talking to Manasan. He says, these guys are fabulous. And PJ, we think you're fabulous. So we love Orville Nation. Orville Nation is one of our big supporters. We are actually talking about doing something with Orville Nation very, very soon. So please stay tuned for that. And please support Orville Nation. Orville Nation is an awesome channel. They've got great content. And they're also just like, PJ is such a leader, I feel like, in the YouTube community and the broadcasting community, in the fandom community. Very positive stuff, which you don't see a lot of positive stuff right now with a lot of YouTube channels. I mean, it's just the way it is. You might even see some negativity on this show from time to time, depending on what we're reviewing and things like that. Hashtag Picard. But anyway, but thanks for tuning in, PJ. We always appreciate you being out there. And he says, Retro Rogues effing rocks, man. And again, I say Orville Nation effing rocks. That's what I say, Dave. What do you say?
I concur. I totally concur. Orville Nation is one of the few shows on YouTube I will still, make the time to drop in and see what's going on.
Absolutely.
It's one of the few. Eric is constantly telling me, it's like, did you watch that? Did you watch this other thing? Or are you aware of this? Are you aware of that? And I'm like, no. and YouTube has no one to blame but themselves. All that nonsense they did, they ran me off YouTube. And even though I do have sort of a weird shadowy channel that's sitting there right now that I'm not doing anything with, I have this love-hate relationship still with YouTube. That's just my personal opinion. Does not reflect the opinion of the Retro Rogues or any of the associated whatever. But that's just me. That's how I'm feeling. They started all this, so it's on them.
Well, the love fest is mutual. Orville Nation says Dave is a creative genius, and I definitely agree with that, PJ. Having actually worked with Dave, I can tell you that is absolutely 100% true. And actually, Dave and I were working on a project that we were talking about off the air, which we hope to have some more news about very soon. So, yeah.
If that all comes together, that's going to melt people's minds, in my opinion. I think they're going to be like, friggin' what? Well, we'll get into it soon enough. Soon
enough. And then Manasan says, you can say that again, backing up Orville Nation and PJ there. So, and Manasan, we really appreciate you being on, because you always give a lot of good comments and stuff like that. So we always enjoy when you tune into the show and comment. So keep those comments coming. Dave, do we have any other general impressions, or should we start to get into spoiler territory?
We can get into spoiler territory, I think, now. I think that's pretty good. So for those of you who are watching, just be aware we're now going to talk spoilers for the second episode of Warrior Nun. Again, it's on Netflix. In case I haven't said that enough, I feel like we should get paid for every time I say that. But anyhow, we are gonna talk spoilers now for the Warrior Nun. So let me just start off with this thing just right off the bat. They are calling the thing in her back the Halo, right?
Yes.
Okay, I thought so. For some reason, in the back of my head, when I keep thinking about that, I'm like, are they calling it the Halo? I think they're calling it the Halo, but for some reason, it's just not clicking in my mind. So for this episode, I think the big reveal, in all honesty, is just what's happening with this new player, this corporation. They're basically, again, I bring up that scene in Spider-Man 2, and I can't remember what it is that Doc Ock is experimenting with. But I remember that scene very vividly where he's got the robotic arms and he's like, the power of the sun in the palm of my hand. Anyhow, I don't remember what it was called, but there's a moment in Warrior Nun where this corporation unveils essentially, it's almost like this technology they've developed where they can basically open a portal to essentially like another dimension or whatever they're calling it. And of course, the cardinal, who actually is sort of like represents the church more directly than the priest gentleman that we saw in the last episode, who was in the bar at one point. I just want to look at the drink. I'm not going to drink it. That guy, because I can't remember his name. Anyhow, the cardinal basically tells them, look, you're messing with powers you can't possibly understand. And they're actually using apparently some kind of a relic or an artifact to help power and manipulate this ability to open this doorway. So I'm thinking it's a doorway to hell. What do you think?
I actually thought it was a doorway to heaven.
You think it's heaven? Okay.
Yeah, I thought it was a doorway to heaven. And that is kind of spoiler thing, because I think that line is actually said in the teaser, in the trailer.
Okay.
So it's not just coming from me. I think that line is actually in the trailer that they talk about, that she's opening, or at least she thinks, right? That's another, that could be another twist. Like she thinks she's opening a doorway to heaven. And actually, I think that was the Cardinal's warning, wasn't it? That you are opening the gateway to hell. You know what I mean? Like you're it's the idea that you're playing with forces you don't understand. This is actually a very true Catholic concept, which is that the idea that demonic possession occurs because you open a doorway. For instance, they say don't use a Ouija board because they say that you're opening a doorway to the other side and you don't know what's going to come through. And it's kind of like you've given your consent. That's the way that demonic possession works in the cosmology of the Catholic Church, is that basically you can't really just be possessed just because. Like, it's not some random thing. It's like, no, you had something to do with that. You kind of played with things. Again, the Ouija board is the most common thing you hear about, and then that leads to the possession. So it's kind of interesting, you know, in that regard for me, because like I said, I grew up with this stuff. And so when I see things like that, I'm like, okay, maybe they did their homework on this. Maybe these guys actually know what they're talking about. And I like to see that, you know, even if I do think that there's a lot of irreverence, you know, to the church. I can kind of see, like, I feel like this Cardinal guy is going to be corrupt, right, Dave? I mean, is that kind of what you're feeling?
Yeah, you know, I had the feeling that you know, in a weird way, I think making him corrupt is too obvious. I think that the Cardinal guy might turn out to just be like a stand-up guy, and they may just kill him.
Interesting.
I mean, for me, that's what I would do, because the tired thing to do is have the Cardinals secretly be behind something. But in a weird way, they kind of are, because they've got the Warrior Nun program. It's like, I think it'd be more interesting if it turns out the Cardinal's sort of like a Commissioner Gordon kind of guy. He's actually a stand-up guy, and he believes, and he's whatever, and then they just kill him. It's like, you know, maybe you think you kind of give him the side eye going, I don't know about this guy. And it turns out he's a righteous dude all along, and then they kill him early, and you're like, oh no. You know, I mean, that's what I think they're going to do, because I think that's less obvious. You know, but then again, I wouldn't have had it been a doorway to heaven. Talk about cliche and obvious. I'd have it been a stairway to heaven. And then once they activate the stairway to heaven, then Mark Dacascos can come out and we can have a crossover with The Crow. And make it a 90s indie crossover adventure.
Well, let's throw Lady Death in there then too. You know what I mean?
Why not? Sure, why not?
That, you know what I That would be cool. We're actually doing like an ad hoc Rogues Writers Room right now.
That's right. We are. Yeah.
How we would do the story if we were writing. But actually,
Right.
I agree with you, Dave. I think in today's world, the less obvious thing to do is actually have the cardinal be a good cardinal, which is kind of funny. But I kind of feel like that's not where we're going. So that alone kind of makes me want to keep watching the show just to see who's right. You know, if you're right or if I'm right, because just what I'm seeing with the writing, I feel like they're going to go the obvious route, which is that the cardinal is corrupt because that's the thing that's in today. So, you know, you've got to bash the church. You know what I mean? Like that's just the popular thing to do. So I'm actually worried about the priest as well. The father that apparently runs the Warrior Nun program. I kind of feel, because we already got an inkling of that. We didn't really talk about it, but in the last episode, we got an inkling of that because they were talking about killing Ava, right? He was talking with the one nun about actually killing Ava to retrieve the halo. But now he talked to the other nun and said no, which I thought was interesting. Did you pick up on that, Dave?
Yeah, I did. And apologies, my dogs are probably going to be barking in the background.
It's all right. Hey, they're part of the Rogues Gallery too. They're just making their voices heard.
They're just voicing their opinion. Ripley really doesn't like this show, so don't listen to her. I mean, yeah, I could see that. I mean, you know, it would kind of fit. And unfortunately, I think you're right. It's like, you know, it's weird because there was things about the first episode, the kind of unconventional aspects of it that I kind of liked. And the YA thing for me, sort of the Riverdale aspect of it, if we use that terminology, because I like that. Like the Riverdale aspect of the show really appealed to me in the first episode. But then there was just things about the second one where I'm like going, okay, well, that was kind of interesting within the context of this Warrior Nun idea. And now that we're this far into it, I'm like going, okay, now I feel like you're just walking over things that we've seen before. You know, we're just treading the same earth that we've, you know, it just felt like a lot of like, okay, I've seen this before. And that's why I said, for me, the big twist, the thing I found interesting, I agree with you, was the corporation angle with the idea of opening this doorway. Because like I said, clearly we had two different reads. I thought that, you know, they're thinking they're opening a, you know, because they're talking about it from a scientific standpoint.
Right.
It's just a doorway to another reality or doorway to another dimension. Like they're not actually asking the big questions about, you know, what's on the other side. You know?
Right.
So we're not 100% certain that, you know, exactly what it is that they're opening to, because the corporation types pretty much don't think it's heaven. I don't think they believe in heaven. At least by the way that they were talking to the cardinal anyway. That's why I thought the most interesting thing to do with the cardinal is just have him be a stand-up guy. Just have him be right. It's like you're meddling with forces you don't understand. You know, like just leave it at that. Why not? And because I feel like we've seen so much of the other, it is tired, and it is time to move on from it. You know, and you could just have him believe in what he believes and have him die for his beliefs. Why not? That used to be a thing. That used to be a trope.
That used to be a thing. Yeah, that used to absolutely be a thing.
Right.
But it seems like that's kind of considered passé now, and it's just which I think is ironic, because what happens is I've made this argument. I've been making that argument with this show, is that what happens is supposedly they're flipping the script, but we've seen the script so many times now that you're not flipping the script anymore. So it becomes predictable. And that's a real problem, I think, with a lot of the modern television shows and modern movies right now is, you know, we've always got, you know, Nerdrotic says this all the time. He says this all the time about a lot of these shows. It's like, she's the key to everything. You know, that's like that we have seen that so many times now. It's like, oh, come on. And then, of course, like what we're talking about right now, it's like, of course, the Catholic Church has to be corrupt. You know what I mean? That's just a given. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know. I mean, these guys are obviously supposed to be part of like an elite group that are dealing with like literally demonic possession, which that's a real thing in the Catholic Church to this day. They do have exorcists. You know, they're not out there fighting like warrior nuns. But interesting thing, if you know anything about exorcism, it's not just the priest. There's a team, and usually the team are like a couple like big burly guys, because if they have to hold down the person that's possessed, because they do get violent, I mean, this is a real thing that happens. Whether you believe it or not, this is the real process that actually happens. They usually do have, some big guys and stuff like that are there to be literally muscle, while the priest does his thing. So the basic concept is actually somewhat, based in real life in terms of what the church actually does and how they do things. Every diocese actually has an exorcist, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. Even today, I remember my parish priest talking about that one time in one of his homilies, that every parish, basically every bishop, has an exorcist. And you don't hear a lot about exorcism, these days. It doesn't happen nearly as much as it used to, because now the church has a process where they say, hey, this person's mentally ill, they're not possessed. Whereas back in the old days, hey, you were mentally ill, you were possessed, and they had an exorcist come for you, but they don't do that anymore. Part of that team I was talking about usually involves a psychologist or a psychiatrist. They're that advanced now. So I am kind of, like I said, going back to the corporation thing, I am kind of intrigued with this idea. Dave, I'm curious what you thought about this divinium, and if you've ever heard of this concept before.
No, I've never heard of it before. I had the feeling it was some sort of MacGuffin that was created for the show, because it's not something I'm familiar with. At least I've never heard of something called divinium that comes from the Catholic faith. I mean, that is that also like the power of the sun in the palm of my hand?
Yeah, I think it's similar to that concept. I think you hit the nail on that. I actually thought of it as like adamantium, from the Marvel universe and things like that, or, adamantium or whatever. The different ideas they have in Marvel of these kind of super substances, like Captain America's shield and Wolverine's claws and things like that. I thought maybe they were kind of doing something like that.
I could see that. Of course, in the MCU, adamantium became vibranium, because I think adamantium is attached to a different series of intellectual property now, which is still, to me, is just so friggin' weird, because it's like, is it now? Yeah, I know, together. But it's like, aren't those just two different kinds of? Because in the comics, it was just two different kinds of super strong metals, that existed in the, they both kind of did, because Captain America's shield was made from, I think, if I remember correctly, I think it was made from vibranium in the comics, and then Wolverine's claws were made from adamantium. And so the big thing was like whenever the two of them would clash, it's like, what's more powerful, the vibranium or the adamantium? Are Wolverine's claws going to break, or is Captain America's shield going to get scratches in it? It's like a nerdy argument. But no, yeah, like I said, divinium was something I'd never heard of, and I just assumed it existed basically just for the show. I'm kind of surprised too, and honestly, we haven't had a little bit more revealed about the halo, because the halo that's in Ava's back is the one thing I'm really curious about, because of course, obviously, the halo, talking about angels and a lot of the iconography, a lot of it familiar with it, I was really curious to learn kind of more about that, and they haven't really spent much time talking about it at all. And I guess that's the thing I find the most surprising, is that those things that normally we would be knee deep in by now, what the halo is, what it does, what the actual threat is. There's a big thing. I still don't exactly quite understand what the threat is in this show. I mean, there's this demon thing walking around, killed this poor girl who was basically just, trying to clean up the end cap display of the t-shirts. Boy, she didn't deserve that. I still don't understand why he showed up there. Is he tracking Ava? It felt like he was just sort of randomly just walking around, and he's just like, I can't find her. What's she doing? Ugh, and he just kills her just because he's annoyed and she's in the way, Yeah. Not the Domino's pizza annoyed, but annoyed.
Annoyed. I also wanted to mention that I did think it was interesting, the mercenary character that apparently wasn't specifically hired to actually, it doesn't sound like, to deal with the nuns, and didn't really know that was what he was there for. Because we have both sides of it, where the nuns are like, these guys seem like they were ready for us, and this was an ambush. But then the mercenary guy, who apparently was running security, he's saying, what are these warrior nuns? Like, I didn't know that was going to happen. So that's kind of interesting too. There's obviously something going on where even the different players within the different groups seem to be kind of confused about, what's really happening, who's really pulling the strings, what's really going on. So that was a little bit intriguing to me as well. I did kind of like that this mercenary character apparently has some issues with the corporation that he works for, and that apparently he's not quite in the loop. And I thought that was interesting.
Well, and that's what I said. That's the thing that's curious about this show. Like I said, once they introduced all the corporate elements, not that I'm a corporate shill, but once they introduced all the corporate elements in the show, I felt like it gave it some interesting kind of different, because I wasn't expecting it we were going to open a doorway. Like right. I was like, I thought that, we were going to be focusing on her getting up to speed and she's the one, and the halo does something magical in her that it didn't do in someone else. And now she can take on this demon thing that's walking around, killing these poor people working retail. Like I thought that,
poor people working retail.
Yeah, because Lord knows it's not right out there right now. So I thought that, that's just kind of where we were going. So when we have this, sort of that Spider-Man 2 kind of scene and we're opening a doorway, I'm like, okay, that's interesting. I feel like we're kind of, it also had shades of Hellboy. If you remember Hellboy, like it had shades of Hellboy too.
Oh, absolutely.
The right hand to Doom and that whole kind of idea, So that was the stuff I found most intriguing. So the extra added things, like the fact that the mercenary guy's like, what's up with this Warrior Nun thing? And there's also some intrigue too, just happening there's just a lot of pieces on the board, and we still don't understand how they relate to each other. And that's part of the thing that's most interesting. That's why I like the idea of the Cardinal just being a stand-up guy. You have so many things going on. You have so many different potential players that could turn out to be good or bad, including the potential boyfriend. I still think there's something going on with that guy beyond what he's telling her, because that always is, right? So I feel like there's enough pieces on the board that the Cardinal can just be, just a stand-up dude. Why not? When you have that many different characters that you can do something interesting with, the characters that you always normally flip, you could actually just leave alone for once. Why not?
Yeah, you could. Like I said, with modern writing, I don't know if that's what's going to happen. It would be interesting to see. So I think you and I are kind of at least intrigued by that concept to figure out what's going on there. Getting back to the Divinium, James had a comment where he talked about DC had Inertron. Is that right, Dave? You probably know what that is more than I do.
Yeah, Inertron.
Inertron. Okay, Inertron.
At least
I'm not familiar with that concept. What exactly is that in the DC universe?
Well, that's the thing. I am loosely familiar with it, but I'm not going to say I'm an expert in it. I'm actually going to look it up on the phone unless James beats me to the punch. As heavily steeped in the DC universe as I am, I've heard the term, but quasi-particle based off of nano research. Maybe it sounds like it's a real thing. Let's see here. I am still okay. Inertron DC fictional medical chemical substance found in the the DC Legion of Superheroes universe. I guess it's the hardest, densest metal. Yeah. Adventure Comics 336, introduced in 1965, used by the Legion of Superheroes.
James says it's basically an indestructible metal.
Yeah.
So very similar to the adamantium concept. I don't think Divinium, though, is supposed to be that. I don't think Divinium is supposed to be, impenetrable. But yeah. I don't know. It did look like it was like a shield that they had excavated.
Right.
So maybe it is. Maybe it's exactly the same thing. But obviously it has other properties. Like we see it glow. It obviously glows in proximity to Ava because she has the halo. We can see that when she's walking around. She also caused the Cardinals' ring to glow, and he didn't notice. Which I thought was interesting.
I thought that was interesting too. I thought that they were going to do something immediately with that, that kind of idea. Yeah, see, that's what I'm saying. There's enough intrigue with the Warrior Nun, we'll call it universe, so to speak, that there's a lot of interesting things happening that, I'm curious, And then James also says that that's what they encase Validus in.
I'm not familiar with Validus.
Well, Validus is one of the big super bad characters in the Legion of Superheroes. He's part of the, what do they call it? The darn it, I know he and Mano were on the same team. My Legion knowledge, James, is not that terribly strong. I love the characters, and I've actually worked on Legion, which is really, I always hate when a comics professional doesn't know much of. Yeah, Fatal Five. I thought it was the Fatal Five, but I didn't want to say the wrong thing. But yeah, he's a part of a one of the major groups that actually fight Legion of Superheroes that keep coming back up. But like the Emerald Empress, Persuader, they're on the same group. No, yeah. I didn't realize he was actually encased in Ertron.
Yeah, James confirms it's the Fatal Five.
Yeah, the Fatal Five.
So, how are we feeling about episode 3 of Warrior Nun, Dave? Are we intrigued enough? I think we might want to figure out what's going on with the Cardinals. So, are we intrigued enough?
Yeah, I mean, I'm willing to hang on for one more episode. I don't know, but we have some other things we want to talk about too. I guess we've still got some time before we get to Lower Decks. So, I'm willing to do a third episode of Warrior Nun. Although I wanted to try and pitch you on the idea of doing the what's that new Netflix show that's based off the Greg Rucka comic. I'm trying to remember the name of it. I think it's The Order.
The Order?
Yeah. Oh, the Old Guard.
Is that the Charlize Theron thing?
Yes.
Okay. So I have heard of it. So yeah, is that a series or a movie?
It's I think it's just a movie. I'm looking it up right now because I've seen that. I was familiar with it. I haven't read, again, it's another one of these things. I haven't read the series. I just saw the trailer for it and I was like, huh, this looks interesting.
Well, I would say if anybody in the Rogues Gallery has an opinion on that, let us know. If you want us to continue with Warrior Nun, I think we're intrigued enough to do that. If you want us to move on to something like the Old Guard, right? That's what it's called, Dave?
Yeah, Old Guard is a movie.
So if you want us to do something like that, which I think that actually is number 1 on Netflix right now, if I'm not mistaken, because I remember the Charlize Theron thing. So, folks, let us know if you would rather us move on to something else, and it could be even something that we're not even talking about right now, or if you want us to continue with Warrior Nun, let us know. Give us some comments, give us some feedback, because that'll kind of, I think, sway us, over the edge one way or another. So as of right now, I think we'll kind of leave it in the air. Dave and I will probably talk off the air a little bit about it to figure out what we want to do. But please comment if you have an opinion one way or another. I do know, for instance, that James said he doesn't have Netflix, so it sounds like he wouldn't. That's not going to really help him one way or the other. But I will say this: I don't know how everybody is with this, but I watch reviews on shows I don't watch all the time, just because I think the commentator is entertaining. I've watched several reviews from Doomcock or Nerdrotic, from Orville Nation on stuff that I wasn't really watching, but I like the channel, I like the commentator, so I just watch it anyway because I don't really care if I'm spoiled because it's just not something that I'm interested in, But I will listen to someone else talk about it. So, but yeah, definitely let us know what you guys think as far as should we continue with Warrior Nun or move on to something else? The Old Guard seems like a contender.
And there's also the possibility, too, because we're going to be talking about the Peacock. I mean, we might find something amazing on the Peacock service. Like, oh, we got to talk about this. Kind of like how we wound up on Split Second, because I realized Split Second was on something. I am oh yeah, we gotta watch Split Second. And Eric's going, I guess we could. I'm not sure about this. So you never know. We might find something like that. Something I'm just like, oh, we got to do that. And Eric's like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Eric's beginning to realize that my taste in films is a little suspect.
Yeah, and James points out, he's here and he doesn't have Netflix. You know what I mean? And he's here listening to our review. So we really appreciate that. Like I said, I do the same thing for other channels. I will watch reviews even if I don't have access, to that particular outlet, because I don't have everything. Right now I don't have CBS All Access, and we plan on reviewing Lower Decks, so I got to get it back. So it is what it is, right?
The funny thing is, I just canceled CBS All Access. I just canceled it, and then they what's the Godfather quote? Just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in. But here's the thing. It's just because it's Lower Decks. I mean, I hate the way they release stuff on CBS All Access because none of us had any idea that Lower Decks was hitting this thing. They've barely friggin' talked about it.
I know.
And it's like we get a trailer and it's coming out. It's like, what do you mean it's coming out? It's like, aren't you all gonna kind of build up to it? Lord knows you built up to Picard for it felt like 9 years or something, right. And then it finally comes out, and the Lower Decks is like, hey, look, here's a trailer. It's out tomorrow. It's like, what? What do you mean it's out tomorrow?
No, I agree with you. I definitely had the same experience, and I think this is a good segue. Let's segue into pop culture, because I do want to talk about Lower Decks. So if you don't mind, kind of setting it up, Dave, I'll get the banner out, and
and I've got the banner up too.
Let's talk some pop culture news.
All right, so we'll just set this up real quick. So here in the pop culture news segment, we talk about anything interesting happening in the world of pop culture news that caught my attention or Eric's attention that we think you, our dear valued viewer, our dear valued listener, would find interesting. It could be a toy. It could be, ironically enough, like this evening, it could be a model kit. It could be an upcoming show. It could be anything happening in the world of pop culture news that we would enjoy discussing or we think you should know about. So with that, tell me, Eric, what's up first for this installment of Pop Culture News?
As I mentioned, you all know it's coming. We want to talk about Lower Decks because we have committed, Dave and I have talked about it. We are going to watch this. This, for me, is New Trek's last chance. This is my last chance that I'm giving to New Trek. When I say New Trek, I mean the CBS All Access stuff. I'm talking about Discovery, Short Treks, Picard, all of which I haven't been a big fan of. I thought Picard was horrible. I was just going to put that out there. But I am giving New Trek one more chance with Lower Decks. And I have a deadline article here for you. And it says, Star Trek Lower Decks trailer, key art launch into the media universe. So we have the announcement, as Dave was talking about, that Lower Decks is coming out. It says the official trailer and key art for the new animated comedy Star Trek Lower Decks is out. The show bows on streaming subscription service CBS All Access on August 6th, which is right around the corner. That's what Dave is talking about. This kind of took us back a little bit. Following the premiere, new episodes of the series' 10-episode first season will be available to stream weekly on Thursdays, exclusively for CBS All Access subscribers in the U.S. Which, by the way, that's interesting. I don't know who they're if they have an international partner, because this article doesn't talk about that. I don't know if they're doing Amazon or Netflix or what, because that has been an issue with New Trek. People probably know this, maybe you don't. But this was a big controversy. Star Trek Discovery basically was financed by Netflix because Netflix had the international rights to Star Trek Discovery. And many accounts have said that essentially Netflix bankrolled that Star Trek Discovery, and they hated it. In other words, it was not a good return for them. So when it came time for Picard, they passed, said hard pass. And Amazon stepped up and took Picard for international. So I don't know where Lower Decks is going to end up internationally, or even if it has an international partner at this point. But again, Dave and I have said that we are going to go ahead and review this. And then Portronic says that pop culture, I love it. And he says that I'm looking forward to it. And I don't know if Matt means pop culture in general or specifically Lower Decks. If you're someone that's actually excited about Lower Decks, I was talking to Dave a couple of weeks ago. I did a post when some of the big first news of Lower Decks was coming out. I think like 2 weeks ago, and I tagged Dave on the post. I tagged Orville Nation on the post. Tagged quite a few people on the hashtag All Star Trek thread. That people that I know, and I got a really negative response. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people are like, hard pass. I am not going to watch this show. Picard broke me, and I'm done. And there's already some real hatred out there for the show before it's even come out. So I thought a good thing for us to do, Dave, was do a good old fashioned trailer reaction. Obviously, we can't do the sound, unfortunately, because music always gets us, it always gets us into trouble. So we can't do the sound, but it is an animated show, so there is some value, I think, in just being able to see the trailer and the artwork. So are you good with that, Dave?
Sounds good to me.
All right, let me blow it up a little bit, and let's take a look at this trailer. And if you haven't seen it, and this is your first time, you can enjoy it with us fresh. Now, I have watched it before because, again, I can't give you the volume because we don't want to get flagged. So here we go. You got a good view of it, Dave?
Yeah, I can see it.
That's the ship. That's a good view of the ship. And this is a new. I think it's called the California class. I think this. My understanding is this is a new design. To me, it's very kind of almost like kind of Reliant-ish. Would you say?
Yeah, it's kind of Reliant-like.
So it's not like a completely different kind of design. I mean, I think it does very much fit with Star Trek, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, but I'm of the opinion they could have just made it a Reliant class and just had it be a tug, because the Reliant was actually a tug.
Was it? That's interesting. So
yeah, I used to play the Phasa game Starfleet Battles, and all the different ships, of course, have different classifications according to what they do, whether they're a cruiser, heavy cruiser, patrol ship, tug, whatever. And the Reliant was actually a tug.
Okay, cool. Gotcha. Now, this is a pretty good view of the back of the ship there. And again, you know what? Just my personal opinion, it reminds me a lot of the Reliant, but I do like the fact that they are doing a new ship design, because we really didn't get that in Picard, Dave. I hated that in Picard, that basically the ship, we got like what? I think maybe 2 or 3 new ships. We basically got one new Romulan ship, one new Starfleet ship, and then, of course, the ship that Picard was on. I think that was it.
Yeah, and my big complaint with Picard was the fact that we didn't have any sort of the trappings of the Federation. Star Trek, to me, when you take the uniforms and the comm badges and the ships, and you take away all the trappings, the veneer, the proscenium, whatever you want to call it. When you take all those things away, it's no longer whatever it was supposed to be anymore. And that was part of my problem with Picard. Picard just felt like a random science fiction show that just happened to have Patrick Stewart in it. And this at least looks and feels more like Trek.
So we kind of move on. These are some of the main characters here, because a lot of the promotion for this is a little bit misleading, because there's almost like 2 sets of characters. There's basically the stars are supposed to be the lower decks people, the people in this image here. It's not supposed to be the actual bridge crew. That's one of the reasons that this is supposed to be a little bit different. And it's very much supposed to be inspired by the Star Trek Next Generation episode Lower Decks, which actually is one of my favorite episodes. As a kid, I actually thought that was like a soft pilot. Like, I thought that could have been a spinoff where they just did a series about junior officers on the Enterprise. I think that actually could have worked, and Lower Decks showed that. So that's kind of what the premise is here. So we've got the 2 of the main characters, obviously acting goofy. This is a comedy. This is the first Star Trek comedy. And they are being kind of silly. You can see that. This effect here looks pretty cool to me with the shuttle there. Oh, and I guess I should go back. That is the name of the ship there, the USS Cerritos. Does that sound right?
Yeah, Cerritos.
Cerritos.
It's. I be honest with you, I haven't. I've seen this. I've had this trailer on a couple different times, but I don't think I've actually sat down and focused on it too much because two of the characters remind me too much of characters from Red Skirts. So I just
Yeah, I
kind
could
of
see that. I could see that. Now,
yeah.
this particular
So
character, I'm guessing, is an Orion. That's my guess.
yep,
That she's an Orion.
yep. I just thought
And
it was funny. She has freckles just like Shiva. I just thought that was weird.
I want to go back. It goes back real quick. Now, this character here, she is the doctor, and she is part of the actual bridge crew. So my understanding is she's going to be like a secondary character. But what I like about this is a direct reference to the Star Trek animated series, because she's supposed to be that feline race. That there was a character on Star Trek the animated series that was from her same race, and we've only seen them.
I was going to say it's the Cations, I think it is.
And we've only seen them in animated form. So that's kind of interesting that I do like that legacy that we've never really seen them, in live action, but we get to see them in the cartoons. So I thought that's kind of neat. It's a callback, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, there's going to be some gross out humor, I think, in this. We can see there with this poor guy's heart being ripped out. It seems to me that, she's wearing blue, so I'm guessing she's a doctor or a nurse. And I'm guessing she's not a very good one. That's what I'm thinking here, right, Dave?
It's very possible.
She's literally ripping this guy's heart out of his chest. I think she's not very good at her job. That's just going to be my guess there. I do like the shuttle design. It's very classic. Actually, it's very reminiscent, I think, of the original series, in my opinion.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Little bug alien. Things go by fast, obviously. This is a pretty fast trailer. A lot of this is dialogue heavy. These are supposed to be gags. I do know some people were criticizing this because they just didn't feel the jokes were all that funny. And I honestly was kind of feeling the same way. I thought a lot of the jokes were like, I don't know, man. That's not really that funny to me. But we'll see. This is another one of the main characters. He's obviously very much inspired by Geordie LaForge. He has the yellow, and I believe he's an engineer, and of course he has like an eyepiece. And at Star Trek Vegas, I went to the Lower Decks panel, and they said that is deliberate. That is kind of an homage to Geordie, that character. So again, we got these callbacks. Now, if I'm not mistaken, that looks like that might be the animated version of the Borg. I'm not sure. What do you think, Dave?
I think it's definitely the animated version of the Borg.
Which I think is interesting. It looks like these are real Borg. These are not the X-Borg. You know what I mean? The pathetic X-Borg that we saw in Picard. This looks like we might get some real Borg. That'd be kind of cool, right?
Yep.
And we can see that they cleaned house there. It looks like they took them out. I don't know if this is a real thing or a simulation. This character here obviously is I think the head of security. So maybe he's part of security because yellow is security. So I don't know if he's supposed to be an engineer or security because this is the head of security over here. I know that. That's actually goes by real quick, but that's a good shot of the main characters right there. So these are our main characters right there. The B team, if you will. And I did think this was kind of funny. I can see people being a little bit upset by this scene in terms of like, if you take it too seriously, it's like they don't even know what part of the ship they're in. But I do think it's funny because they're like, hey, we're up here, like at the top. And it's like, no, this is why it's called Lower Decks. They're way down here, basically, in the rear end of the ship, It says there's the crew on the bridge. And that's the crew on the bridge, by the way. That doesn't come out very well. See if I can get a better shot of that. So you can see this is the bridge crew right there. The captain, it is a female captain. The second officer here, I believe the head of security, and also the doctor. But that's not
I hate when they do that thing where the character needs to shave and they're trying to do the 5 o'clock shadow. I hate when they do that. I don't like it when they do that on animated characters like that because it just looks so weird. It's like a coloring error. I really dislike that.
I feel like it's deliberately supposed to look weird, though. You know what I mean?
I know, but I don't. But it's like either give the character a beard or don't. Because look at his body. That is a hairless dude. It's like either give him a beard or don't give him a beard. Pick one.
He's very muscular, though.
Yeah, I guess for no body hair.
That's interesting alien there. I don't think that's something we've seen before. He looks like the Hulk, you know. So
he does look like the Hulk. I'm pretty sure because there's going to be tons of pop culture. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if there's callbacks to Star Wars, there's callbacks to Marvel. I mean, there should be all kinds of stuff like that in this, in all honesty.
Well, that might be directly what this is, because it definitely reminds me of that Thor Ragnarok, which of course was inspired by the comic. What was it? Was it the Hulk War Planet or something like that, where he's a gladiator?
Planet Hulk.
Planet Hulk. So it does remind me of that. So which I think would be kind of cool, you know, if they have some stuff like that. We'll see if that's the direction they're going or not. And this, I remember the line in this I thought was funny, where they talk about, hey, we did another great Second Contact. And that's one of the premises I like about this show, is that basically that's what this crew specializes in. They specialize in Second Contact. So even the bridge crew, they're not the A-team either. We got some more images here. Looks like there's going to be some action, some fighting, which is kind of cool. And of course, it looks like they're going to screw up a lot. I want to go back to that image. I actually kind of like that. I just want to go back to that. That's pretty, for kind of a cutesy, kind of silly show. I kind of like that image there.
Well, that image, if you notice, it's that the color palette, the way that's put together. In all honesty, that's heavily influenced by Star Trek: The Animated Series, in my opinion.
And I'm hoping that's the case. I'm hoping they're going to take a lot of cues from the animated series. That would be awesome. I don't know what these aliens are. These might be new aliens that we haven't seen before. It looks like they're obviously in danger. Again, that's a pretty good view of the ship. And this is a scene I think has got some fans some fans love it and some fans hate it. I've seen a lot of hate for this one about her. She's playing with the blast shields and she's like doing a little song, blast shields, blast shields. And some people think this is really funny and some people think it's really stupid. Oh, that was I think a Bolian. That's kind of neat. I think that's a Bolian.
Yeah.
And then this is the most controversial scene. It ends on the most controversial scene, which you'll see why. The main character is naked. Apparently he was waiting for someone else and then his friend walked in. And then this is a scene where she almost basically vaporizes him.
Right.
Because she's saying it was on stun. Oh wait, no, it wasn't on stun. So obviously, it seems like they're kind of meant to be sort of incompetent, for lack of a better. Well, that's what it is, right? They're supposed to be kind of a bunch of idiots, right?
Right, and we'll see. Like I said, we're gonna review it for the show. We'll see. I mean, I have had kind of sort of, it's kind of weird because since I do a Star Trek parody series with Red Skirts, some of this is like sort of a direction that Al and I discussed that we intentionally steered away from that they're doing in this show. And then there's other aspects of this show that obviously we are exploring because Red Skirts is a parody and is a comedy series. But unfortunately, that's like I said, the couple times I've had the trailer on, I can't be objective about it. I think because of Red Skirts. And it's not that it's like, well, they don't have a right to do it. It's not that. It's just the idea that I feel like they're like Al and I had conversations about, well, we can't do that, and we can't do this. And these are the reasons why. And then in this trailer, they do a lot of that kind of stuff. And I'm like going, see, I want to be like, see, it doesn't work. That's what I want. That's my total review of this. It's like, see, that idea right there, I knew that wasn't going to work. But the funny thing is, no one else was in on those conversations. But there's literally a few cues and a few bits they do in this that Al and I discussed. And I'm like going, well, you can't do that because it's not going to play right, or you can't do that because it's going to seem too strange, or we can't do that because it just doesn't fit within the context, of Trek. Even if you're being funny, it doesn't fit within the context of Trek. And that's sort of my takeaway from this trailer. I'm like going, see, I was right. That doesn't work. That's weird.
James just mentioned, it's a little too close to home, and I understand that with, because obviously I'm very familiar with Red Skirts, so I totally understand that. It will be interesting to see that, when you bring up that point that it seems like they're going to be doing things that you specifically said, with your project. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to do that. So it will be interesting to see how that plays out as far as whether it does work or not. I do know that a lot of people are upset about that nude scene at the near the end of the trailer. A lot of fans are upset. So this before it's even out, it's already dividing the fandom. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Like I said, I'm going to give it a chance. Dave and I have said we are going to go ahead and review it. But I don't know exactly what to think. I did like a lot of the artwork with the ship, the space scenes, and I hope there's a lot of that in there because we didn't really get that in Picard, and it would be nice to see that again. You know what I mean? See some real space battles with ship designs and things like that.
And ironically enough, or weirdly enough, that's the thing. It's like watching. There are elements of it where I can see they're taking inspiration, not just from animation, but you can see they are taking inspiration specifically from the original Star Trek animated series, which is really cool because I kind of like the Star Trek animated series.
We agreed, right, that we are going to, as our prelude to Lower Decks, we are actually going to do a retrospective on the animated series the Wednesday before the show comes out, because we talked about that off the air. So we'll make that clarification for everyone. We are going to be talking about the animated series in an upcoming retrospective as a preview for Lower Decks. And Man of Sand has a great comment here that I didn't even know this. It says the Kazin are the feline race created by Larry Niven for his Ringworld and other spin-off novels. He brought them into Star Trek animated series when he wrote for them. Did you know that, Dave?
Well, no, I was not familiar with that, but I did call them Cations, and in the animated series, and actually a lot of the resource books and stuff, I know they are actually referred to as Cations, at least as. So maybe they changed the name for.
Yeah, I wouldn't think they could use the same name. I think it's just the same idea, the same premise.
But I know that Imres, I think that's how you pronounce her name. I know she was definitely supposed to be Cation. So I would think that character was supposed to be Cation, but that doctor character may be someone else. I don't know, or a different kind of slightly offshoot species.
They said at Star Trek Vegas, she's a tribute to the animated series. She's supposed to be the same as the character in the animated series. It's a tribute to that. Which, again, I thought that's neat because we've only seen that race in animated form. They've never taken it live action. Although you can, for people that are not familiar, in Star Trek Online, you can actually be that race. If you're a Starfleet, if you choose Starfleet, you can actually be that race in Star Trek Online.
Well, very cool. Well, we're going to be talking a lot more about Lower Decks coming up. So I think
for better or worse, right? So
yeah.
We'll see how that goes.
And and that's the thing. It's like I think the thing that's visually bothering me the most is I don't like their uniforms.
Really?
I feel like there's too much going on with them for my taste. That's a stupid nitpick, but I think that's the one thing that's rubbing me the wrong way. It's like I don't understand why they just couldn't. Just have them. I mean, because they are kind of slightly augmented versions of Next Gen,
right?
But I almost feel like it would have been fun to have an animated series in the style where they were in the uniforms the same style as Next Gen, because then it's kind of cool. Then you have Star Trek the Animated Series, and they're wearing the classic series uniforms, and then Next Gen has its own animated series where they're wearing the uniform. You know what I mean? Like, I think that'd be kind of fun.
Well, I do
So
know
that's the only thing that's...
Well, I do know they specifically chose the era, which is 1 year after Nemesis, because they didn't want to copy or deal with trying to copy anything that we've seen on screen before. So technically speaking, this is an era in Star Trek we've never seen, and they really wanted to do that because they didn't want to have to deal with a lot of that nitpicking. You know, they wanted to be able to kind of have a clean slate and just kind of do their own thing. So I kind of applaud them for that because I think it's really hard to please everyone. Like, I got into a discussion with someone online where he was saying, you know, his favorite, he's kind of disappointed because his favorite uniform is the Star Trek Next Generation movie uniforms, the ones that they also had at the end of Deep Space Nine. That's his favorite Trek uniform. Well, my favorite Trek uniform is the Wrath of Khan era uniforms. So fans go back and forth about that kind of stuff, right? So I kind of think you can't please everyone, so just do your own thing. That's kind of my take.
Well, I did say it was nitpicky. I mean, and that's what I'm saying. It's just, to me, it just, in a lot of the shots, that's the other thing that sticks out to me is they feel a little busy at times. But that's, like I said, that's being super nitpicky. So
I hear you. No, some people hate the uniforms, Dave. I mean, there's already a lot of hate for this show. It hasn't even come out. So, and I know one criticism that I thought was right on, and it's hard for people who can't hear the audio or haven't watched this themselves, but I agree with it because I had the same criticism of Picard. The characters act very contemporary, and I don't like that. I don't like that for a future show in general. It's like they just act like they came straight out of like today, you know, and I don't like that. They definitely, in that trailer, if you can hear the sound, they talk very like modern teenager. It's just off-putting to me. So
interesting. Okay, cool. Are we good to move over to another pop culture news story?
Absolutely. What do you got, Dave?
Okay. Well, if you'll share my screen, we'll get into this.
You haven't shared your screen with me yet.
Oh, how did my shared screen must have turned off? That's weird. Hold on, everyone. My apologies.
Technical difficulties.
Yeah. Okay.
Here we go.
All right. So for my first pop culture news item tonight, I'm going to talk about this. Pay no attention to that woman's talking on the screen. I can't get rid of her for some reason. There's a joke there somewhere. Anyhow, this is coming from Cosmic Book News, but I did see it other places. But I thought this is kind of cool. Transformers meets Top Gun in new action figure. This is by Will Harrigan, and this actually came out a couple days ago. Kind of showed up in my feed. I thought it was kind of cool for those of us who are in collecting stuff. It says, feel the need for speed. Hasbro Incorporated and Paramount Pictures revealed the first ever Transformers Top Gun collaboration starring the all-new character Maverick. And they've got some images below we're going to look at in just a second. Not to be confused with Captain Pete Maverick Mitchell, this new Transformers robot makes an ideal wingman, taking form as the iconic Northrop Grumman F-14 Tomcat jet from the original Top Gun film. This nostalgic Top Gun mashup of Maverick robot marks a celebratory moment ahead of the highly anticipated sequel to the iconic film Top Gun Maverick, releasing December 23rd, 2020, if we're lucky enough for that to still happen. After more than 30 years of service as one of the Navy's top aviators, Pete Maverick Mitchell, or Tom Cruise, is where he belongs, pushed the envelope as a courageous test pilot and dodging the advancement. Well, we're going to avoid that because that's a synopsis for the film. Anyhow, let's go ahead and let's get down to the pictures. This is some of the box art. That was kind of cool. You can see it's got the classic Maverick helmet from obviously Top Gun. Of course, they've got the logo there. But yeah, it's kind of cool. This is kind of a fun shot. Aircraft carrier is coming in for the landing. This, of course, is the... I thought it was crazy they gave the character a volleyball. Transform the volleyball. It's silly.
Kind of. That's funny.
But if you look at it, with him being an F-14 Tomcat, you can see the style is very reminiscent of, of course, if you especially look at the feet, it's obviously very reminiscent of the Veritech from Robotech. And look, it comes with the motorcycle, couple sets of hands. I thought this was just kind of a fun thing to talk about for those of us. And this is what you're going to be looking for if you find this interesting. This would be probably what you'd be looking for on the shelves. Here it is actually in the box art. The box art also looks like it's got a simulation here of the deck, well, what'd you call that? Would you call that the flight deck, Eric, on the aircraft carrier? Yeah, the flight deck for the aircraft carrier is kind of represented here. I just thought this was some kind of fun and silly to talk about. I love Top Gun. I love Transformers. A lot of times when I have the camera on, you guys can't even see them, but I actually have a fairly decent, well, not decent. I've got a few Masterpiece Transformer figures, and some of my favorites were actually the jets. So I actually have Thundercracker and I have Starscream. But of course, I also have Optimus and Megatron and a few others. So I just thought this was kind of fun. But yeah, so they're going to be releasing this kind of in conjunction with the film. And I thought it'd be just something kind of fun to point out. So there you go.
That's very cool. Anna Sand says it reminds me a bit of Transformers G.I. Joe crossover comics. And I can see that. I have those comics, the original ones, the G.I. Joe Transformers crossover. I can definitely see that. It does kind of remind me of that. Definitely this design reminds me of the G.I. Joe. Gosh, I can't remember which toy it was, but the original Sky Striker, the original G.I. Joe jet, which was an awesome toy that I never had. But it does remind me of that. It's very much the similar design. Also reminds me of Robotech. Reminds me a lot of Robotech.
I actually used to play before the Robotech toys actually came out, and they released the action figures first. I used to actually take my Rick Hunter and actually put him in the Sky Striker and pretend it was the Veritech.
Oh, so,
yeah.
That makes sense because obviously the Transformers toy was a straight rip of the Robotech toy. It was straight. They didn't. I mean, it is the Veritech from Robotech. In the cartoon, he looked different. In the cartoon, he didn't look like.
And the thing is that they actually, because it was, of course, all the Transformers toys come from actually two different toy lines that were actually basically coming out in Japan. And so what ended up happening is they were able to actually license the rights to, the different modes in order to produce the toys and have those be part of the Transformers toy line. But through a weird set of circumstances, they weren't able to actually get sort of the likeness, the theoretical rights in order to use it in the cartoon. So, of course, Jetfire looked completely different in the cartoon versus the actual toy that came out. So it's just an interesting, strange thing with who owns the rights for what. But because Robotech was a Harmony Gold series and everything that was going on with that, it creates it creates that weird sort of thing. I've always actually wanted to own, because they have over the last several years, they have released a couple of different Jetfires. And I always thought it would be fun to actually own a Jetfire, just because I actually quite like Jetfire actually in the cartoon.
Me too.
And so,
but I would like to have an accurate one that looked like the cartoon more. But that is a criticism a lot of people have of Transformer toys.
Oh no, that's
a lot of them don't quite look like the cartoon.
Well, see, that's what I was going to say. The Jetfire they released actually looks like Jetfire from the cartoon.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that was kind of fun, is that they did eventually, over the last couple of years, they've released, I think, one or two, and they actually look like Jetfire as he looked in the cartoon, versus obviously being, the Veritech from Robotech. So.
Right, which was still a very cool toy. A very, very cool toy. Another one that I didn't have, but I knew some people that did. That was also a very cool toy.
And then James is giving me a hard time because he says, we could if you weren't hidden, referencing the fact that you could see the Masterpiece Transformers if I wasn't hiding behind my avatar tonight. However, James, what I was pointing out is that even if the cam was on, you still wouldn't be able to see them, because they're too far back and they're too high up on the shelf.
Well,
but who knows? Just who knows? Maybe I'll get one of them down and I'll show it on the show next week or something. I don't know. We'll see. But I just thought this was kind of a fun thing to talk about. This interesting Transformers Top Gun sort of collaboration. And depending upon the price point, if I see it while I'm out running around, I might pick one up just to sit here on the desk.
No, that's very cool. Very, very cool. I know you've been looking forward to the new film too, and as you mentioned, we really don't know when it's going to come out, but or even how it's going to come out at this point. Things are really kind of up in the air, especially since California is completely shut down again. So it's, who knows when they're going to be getting a lot of this stuff out. But I know it's something we've covered on the show as well. We have been talking about Top Gun Maverick, so this is a cool tie into that.
Yeah, and your up in the air comment wasn't lost on me. So
awesome. Now I have a speaking of movies coming out and all that kind of stuff. I have an interesting article that I found regarding the weekend box office, and people might be sitting there like, weekend box office, what's that? Especially right now. Does that even exist? Well, it does. So Uproxx, this is an article from them. It says weekend box office, the most watched movies at home, which that's not the part of the article I really care about, but it says and in drive-in theaters over the weekend. Dave and I have been talking about this. The Rogues Gallery has been talking about this, the comeback of the drive-in theaters. So this is really an interesting article because a lot of the traditional sources for box office revenue, they're shut down right now because most theaters are closed, but not drive-in theaters. Drive-in theaters are open. And so there is a market out there. There is a box office happening right now. And this article talks about it a little bit. So obviously they do talk about things going on at home with Netflix and things like that, but that's not the part of the article that I really want to focus on. It says, basically, Empire Strikes Back is the top movie at the weekend box office, thanks to drive-in theaters. In fact, this is the third different year that Empire has led the box office. In 1980, upon its release, with the 1997 re-release, and now during the 2020 pandemic, when it is occupying most of those drive-in theater screens around the country. It should earn about $500,000 this weekend, which isn't bad for a 40-year-old film. Meanwhile, as a sign of how the more things change, the more they stay the same in a pandemic, even in decidedly lo-fi drive-in theaters, Disney holds all three of the top spots this weekend, with Empire and the re-release of Marvel's Black Panther and Pixar's Inside Out. It says Disney has apparently come in and chased even low-budget movies like Wretched and Becky out of theaters, which I'm not familiar with those films, but I'm guessing those are small independent films that recently came out and we're maybe hoping to get in this sort of limited market. Because I want to say it's something around 500 or 600 theaters across the country that are open right now, and they're basically all drive-in theaters. So did you know about this, Dave? Did you know Empire Strikes Back is back on top?
I did hear about it because I actually read a similar article, not from Uproxx, but someone else. And they talked about the fact that they thought it was, kind of ironic and interesting. And the image they picked, I quite liked because it was actually a shot of Boba Fett. And, of course, he was there with some of the Bespin guards and stormtroopers. And, of course, they had the carbonite form of Han Solo, and they were taking him to Slave One. And because I'm a huge Boba Fett fan, and I just thought that was really kind of a fun image to see because it's kind of cool because he had the half cape and the whole thing going on, and I just love the look of Boba Fett, so I thought that was fun.
Yeah, I saw an article as well. I think that might have been from Deadline, and because I saw the same image, and it is an awesome image. It's a great image from Empire, but I just thought that was cool. I think we want to give some love to the drive-ins. I think you and I are all for the drive-ins coming back. We were talking about off the air that in Prescott and your community, they were actually doing sort of a makeshift drive-in, and you said that kind of went away. But it would be nice if somebody probably picked that back up again. I think it would be great for me if we had more drive-ins. I actually found out there's a drive-in in Mesa now. There actually is a drive-in in Mesa now. They actually have one. I want to say it's right off of the 202 and either Alma School or Country Club. They took a little plot of land, and I looked into it, and basically what it is it's a bunch of unemployed concert workers, people that work in the the concert industry, and they were like, oh man, we got all this equipment and we can't pay our bills. There's no concerts. So what they did was they made a makeshift drive-in theater in Mesa, which I think is really cool. It's right on the border between Mesa and the Salt River Indian Reservation. So we are seeing this uptick right now with drive-ins. You know what I mean? This could be sort of the new golden age for drive-ins, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah, it could be cool. Some of my fondest memories when I think back on going to the movie theater was actually going to the drive-in in Memphis. And I think my mom had mentioned before on the show that I think that drive-in might still be functioning. But it had a lot of old school, 1950s style sort of like decor about it, and had really cool lights because you'd have to drive up to the box office and then drive out actually to get your spot in front of the screen. And they had it lit up with all these interesting, very ornate deco, like so that 50s deco kind of style, just with the lights and everything. And I always remember as a kid, it just was very, very magical. And I always remember having the best popcorn. I don't know why. Maybe that's just my memory. But I just remember having the best popcorn. So, so I'm all for the drive-in. I think it sounds like a lot of fun. If there had been one closer, because there is actually one out in Cottonwood. It's an actual functioning drive-in. And my wife and I discussed several times about running out there, but because I basically started a business in the middle of the pandemic, we haven't had a lot of time to do that, unfortunately. So
yeah, I can see that. In my case, the main drive-in I've talked about it is in Glendale, which is on the opposite side of town for me. I live in the Phoenix metro area, but I live in what's referred to as the East Valley, and Glendale is considered the West Valley, and basically Phoenix is right in between. And Phoenix is a big city. So I don't get out there very much, and that's why I haven't gone there. But I've thought about checking out this new one in Mesa because that one's actually really close to me. And I didn't even realize that there was a drive-in there. I just kept seeing this setup there. I was like, are they doing a concert or something? Like a drive-in concert? And which, by the way, that's something that has been happening too, I guess. But no, it's actually concert guys who are doing a drive-in movie theater, which I think is interesting. But you know who else is getting in on this, Dave? And I don't know if you saw this. This is actually an older article, but it definitely relates to this. But Walmart is getting in on this. Did you hear about this? Walmart is transforming parking lots into drive-in theaters.
No, I had not heard this at all.
Yeah. So Walmart is getting ready. It says the pop-up drive-in opens in early August at stores around the U.S. Basically, what they're doing is they're partnering with the Tribeca Film Festival, and they are going to just basically put drive-ins into their parking lots. I mean, it's crazy, but it's like, hey, good business is where you find it, right? I mean, this is Walmart, and they kind of see an opportunity. They've got these huge parking lots, and the kind of films they're going to show, it says, is we've got Jaws, Field of Dreams, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, and documentaries including John Lewis' Good Trouble, the story of the congressman's 60 years of activism. So it sounds like there's going to be kind of a variety there, some educational stuff as well as some classics. But what do you think about this, Dave?
Am I required to follow up your good business is where you find it comment with I'd buy that for $1?
Yeah, that's exactly where it's from. It's exactly where it's from.
All right. Okay.
And I absolutely am comparing Walmart to OCP. I absolutely am because I'm not a big Walmart fan. So.
All right. Okay. Well, then,
I think this is a brilliant move. I think this is a brilliant move.
No, it is.
They are top for a reason.
It is. I would be totally down to watch Field of Dreams or E.T. That sounds like fun. The activism documentary, no offense, that doesn't sound like a lot of fun. I would rather watch that sitting on my couch, in my house, than, like now if they were showing Jodorowsky's Dune documentary, that sounds cool. If they had been showing Memory Alpha, the Alien documentary, any of those, that sounds kind of fun. But that other one, I don't know.
No, I get you. I think they're trying to do a variety, and obviously that might be, I could see a scenario where somebody at Walmart, a big high up, is friends with this guy or something like that. You know what I mean? So you definitely have that kind of stuff. But just as a strict business move, I think this is brilliant. You know, I'm surprised that there aren't other companies, malls, things like that are doing the same thing, because I think it's a great idea.
And see, that to me is the logical sort of next progression, because I agree. I think it is a good idea, and I think the mall would be a great place to do that. You know, if your mall, quote unquote, doesn't have a functioning movie theater, like for example, like the mall that we have here in Prescott Valley, it's never had a movie theater. So you know, if you were to do sort of like a drive-in set up at the mall, and you know, show some really fun things, I think that could be a lot of fun. So yeah.
James actually mentions, he says, one of our local Chinese food restaurants on Route 1, the Kunlun, is now set up as a dinner drive-in. That's pretty cool.
See, that's a great idea. I've always loved that idea. I actually, my late friend Scott Clark, who passed away several years ago, we always had talked about back in the days when we thought we were going to get a movie check. He and I had those conversations about if we had the extra money, what would be something fun to invest in. And we always liked the idea of a movie theater, but where you actually got like, you know, an actual full meal kind of deal, as opposed to just like sort of like the snacks, you know what I mean? And you would sit down and have your meal while you enjoy the movie. So I think that's a great idea. And again, it all goes back to that, you know, sort of being creative and out of the box thinking. You know, what kind of interesting thing can you do to encourage people to come out to patronize your business with whatever's going on? And then one of the safest places, they say, you know, is to actually remain, you know, outdoors, you know. So there you go. That's like a win-win on all kinds of levels. That's a really great idea, in my opinion.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I like this trend, and like I said, it just seems like almost like a no-brainer. If you have that kind of setup, if you have a big parking lot, why wouldn't you be doing this? In fact, I've been talking to one of my partners about possibly doing something like this. I was talking to Dave off the air about this. There's an opportunity there, I think, you know, right now, to do something like this, to open up your own drive-in. Like there are a lot of like defunct malls right now in my community that they're closed, they're empty, and there's all that space that's available that's just, they're not using it for anything. And it seems to me this would be a great time. You know, you could also even do like a drive-in concert venue too, because in a lot of places they allow that. So there's an opportunity there. There's no doubt about it.
Well, and two, I think, and we don't see it right now because of everything that's going on, but they were doing some really cool, innovative things with like when they did I forget the name of it, but there's that group, they do sort of that live production, like interactive production thing that kind of works in tandem with the movie. They did a big one actually for Back to the Future, and it has a performance element art to it, but but it's the film, but it's interactive. And I know the Back to the Future one they did in a drive-in kind of setup, which makes a lot of sense because the 50s, that whole idea, it really fits really well. Because that same group, I can't remember the name of it, they also did like Ghostbusters and a couple other productions, and those, they weren't quite what they did for Back to the Future. But like, if you could do that and really find an interesting angle or hook or a theme, I mean, with all that space, I mean, there's all kinds of amazing, awesome things that you can do. I remember I saw years ago, there's a Star Wars fan club back in Memphis, and I was in town for a convention, and I went to one of their meetings, and so the president of the fan club had actually set up they had like sort of like a big movie theater screen in the backyard, and people were just throwing out their chairs and sitting out there and watching Star Wars. And all of them had seen it so much, and that they had like little bits that they would do. So it had sort of like if you've ever seen Rocky Horror Picture Show with an audience. So there's that bit where, Darth Vader's like, "You are part of the Rebel Alliance and a traitor. Take her away." So when they do that, as he's doing the whole, "You're part of the Rebel Alliance and a traitor," and then everybody screamed basically yelled at the screen, go to your room. Because obviously it's Darth Vader's daughter. So anyhow, if I could say screen instead of scream, it would make more sense. But no, I love all of this. I think this is all really fun and cool and a great idea. So yeah, I'm down for it. I think it's cool.
Yeah, James mentions that he heard the sound comes through your car stereo, and that's something that drive-ins have been doing for quite a while. A lot of people that grew up with drive-ins, they don't realize that because back in the day they had this little speaker that you put in the window. But now what they do is you just listen to it on your car radio, or you can bring a boom box with you and you just listen to it over like an FM transmitter, which is pretty cool as well.
For some reason, I was thinking about like in Phoenix, if they had those big giant metal boxes and you went to take one and sit on the edge of your car, that'd be kind of like that scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark where the Nazi guy goes to grab the medallion. He's like, ah! It's burning his hand.
Yeah.
Well, for some reason, that's what I thought of.
Alrighty then. Yeah, I would imagine, especially in Arizona, they would get very, very hot. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
But they don't do that anymore. So.
All right. Well, there you go. I'm glad. I would, I'm just thinking of all these different ways that which characters have grabbed things, and it's like, that's very hot. All right. Well, I have one last pop culture story. So this is actually coming from trekmovie.com. This I'm going to scroll down. It says right here, it says review. This is for the Polar Light Star Trek Discovery USS Enterprise model reimagines a classic. So got a really great shot here. This is by Jeff Bond. It says round 2 models has kept the Star Trek model kit license alive since 2008, when owner Thomas Lowe purchased the rights to the original AMT brand that had controlled the Trek license going back to the production of the original Enterprise kit, for many years the biggest selling model kit of all time in 1967. R2 has not only continued to produce new models from the franchise, but has kept many of the original AMT kits in circulation, repackaging them and reissuing them periodically so that nostalgic older modelers can do a better job building them, and then let's say when they were 10. I take some offense to that comment. But R2 created a buzz a few years ago when they unveiled an illustration of what some of the starships from CBS's All Access series Star Trek Discovery would look like if released at different scales. One 2,500, which puts the original Enterprise at around 4 inches long. One 1,000, which makes the Enterprise just under a foot long. And one and 1,400, which would make the Enterprise at 9 inches long. So anyhow, so this is a shot of the box art here. This is the box art for the round 2 Polar Light Star Trek Discovery USS Enterprise. I have talked before about how much I really enjoy this particular version of the Enterprise. I prefer this one to the JJ Trek or the JJ Abrams version. And what's really kind of cool about this one too, and you can actually go and actually read this, get into this review and see, everything they talk about. I used to build model kits back in the day, and actually I'm part of a group. We're playing War in Europe, which is a big, huge strategy game. And I actually have an Italian battleship I need to be building actually for that, that we're going to be kind of using as decoration. And I'm kind of slowly getting back into doing some model kit building kind of here and there, because I don't have enough hours in the day to do anything. But anyhow, it's crazy, but I really don't have time for any of this stuff. But this just looks fun. I really want to do this. And so they've got some great shots here of them putting the kit together, and just some beautiful details on this kit. And I just think this is really cool. But you can see it's got sort of the lighting there. And then one of the things that's really neat is they show this here. This is where they're applying what they often refers to as the Aztec pattern. I think most diehard Star Trek fans are familiar with this. But when ILM, what was ILM? I can't remember who the original model company was, did the effects for motion picture. Well, anyhow, when they built the original model for motion picture in order to give extra scale and detail and to set it apart from the original series Enterprise. They added in this pattern you see here. They often refer to it as the Aztec. And it gives it a larger sense of scale and texture. And when you light it, it gives all kinds of interesting kind of effects. And then right here, they're actually applying the Aztec pattern. But I just thought this was really cool. I love this version of the Enterprise. Even this shot is so cool. It reminds me of like some of those cool shots you see from the original series where the Enterprise is like in low orbit and the jets are flying up to it when they actually travel back in time. So yeah, this is really cool. And again, it's a departure from the show information and things we typically do with part of pop culture news. But I just thought this was really cool because I know a lot of us Star Trek fans really love this redesign, or really like this redesign of the Enterprise. And it's cool to see all these amazing details and everything that's here. And with Strange New Worlds getting ready to hit, I just thought, well, not hit, but with it, getting ready to go into production, I just thought this would be something fun to talk about. But they've got an amazing gallery here of images. Yeah, this is just cool. I like this so much better than the JJ Trek version. So, well, there you go. Anyhow, I just thought that'd be something fun to talk about.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. As someone who's not a fan of Discovery, I do like this design a lot. I don't think I agree with you. I think they did a better job than the Jar Jar verse, the Kelvin timeline Enterprise, which I don't think is a bad design. I mean, it's still very reminiscent of the original Enterprise, and that's what I like. But this one, I think they did a good job, a better job than they did with the Kelvin, and I do like it. I do like the design. I like the design of the bridge. Actually, I thought they did a good job where they actually made the bridge still look like a kind of modernized TOS bridge, so it still had very much the feel of the original series bridge, whereas the Kelvinverse didn't at all. Kelvinverse, I mean, it was just like, what? That was one of the things. I mean, I enjoyed that film. I even own it, but that was one of the things that was off-putting to me. It's like, this bridge is just weird. And of course, it's because of, JJ's style and all that kind of stuff. It felt very Apple, that makes sense. All the whites and everything.
Right.
But yeah, I do appreciate this design. And I also grew up building Star Trek models. The one I had was a pretty famous set. It was the little snap-on one that had the original Enterprise, the Klingon, with D7, and also the classic Romulan bird of prey from the original series. And it was like a little tripod thing that you put together. It was really easy to assemble. I love that thing, but it got trashed. But so I grew up on that kind of stuff as well. So I definitely appreciate it.
It's really interesting too, especially when you see the details on this ship. It's really kind of cool. One of the things I like about it is, with Discovery, they went back and they looked at like Ralph McQuarrie's concept design stuff, because he actually worked on an early iteration of Trek that they eventually, of course, evolved, from I forget what it was called, something planets, and then it eventually turned into phase 2, and then it continued to evolve until eventually it became motion picture. And Ralph McQuarrie designed a new refit version of the Enterprise, and it had sort of this, Ralph McQuarrie hallmark kind of quality to it that was reminiscent of Star Destroyer or whatever. And they went back to the original design, or his original designs for that ship, and kind of crafted the Discovery out of it. And again, I think it's because they're always trying to bring that Star Wars aesthetic into Trek, because so many of the current people that are, producing Trek, they're kind of more I think everyone's aware, they're more Star Wars fans than necessarily Star Trek fans. But what's really kind of cool about this, and something I think is really neat that I think might have been slightly unintentional, is when I look at this version of the Enterprise, even though I know they were trying to make it more Star Wars when they did the Kelvin timeline, the JJ, films, this to me has more of that Ralph. Like if you've seen a lot of Ralph McQuarrie's design work from Battlestar Galactica, this has that kind of vibe. Do you see that too, Eric, or is that is that just me? It has that Ralph McQuarrie touch, but it doesn't feel forced. It just feels like it's kind of there. I think it's kind of cool.
That's interesting. That it doesn't evoke that in me, I have to say. I mean, I'm looking at it right now. And I'll even blow it up for a second. That's not really what it invokes for me. For me, it just looks like a very much like the original model, but sort of, a hybrid, I guess, of the movie and also the original series. And I like it. I mean, I absolutely do like it, but I think it's very Trek. It doesn't really remind me.
Oh, and that's what I'm saying. It is very Trek, but I think unintentionally, I think it has that Ralph McQuarrie Star Wars, those kind of touches I think they've been trying to put in that feel kind of ham-fisted, that don't quite work at times, yet this just has it organically. I don't know who worked on the redesign of this Enterprise, but it's cool because it pulls from that Ralph McQuarrie concept style, specifically his work with Battlestar Galactica, though, more so than Star Wars, but it evokes that Ralph McQuarrie influence without feeling forced. It's really kind of cool. I just think it's interesting. I mean, maybe I'm seeing something that isn't there, but I just think it's kind of cool. So, but anyhow, that's why I wanted to talk about it. Is I just thought it was really neat, this model kit, and I'm seriously thinking about getting one and putting it together. In my spare time that I don't have, which some people would call sleep.
It does look like a complicated model. It doesn't look like the easy little snap-on one that I had. So I think
you should.
Would be some time invested in doing that one.
You should see the Italian battleships I'm supposed to be working on right now, and it's even got the little plane on the back that fires off the catapult system or whatever.
Oh wow, that's pretty cool.
And
by the way, James mentions you can see the original show's model at the National Air and Space Museum, which I am aware of that, James, and that's a good thing to point out if people are interested in seeing the original Enterprise from the TV series. That's where you can go to see it.
Very cool. Are we good to segue over to Streaming Wars, or?
Yeah, let's go ahead and get into the Streaming Wars. That sounds good to me.
All right. We'll set this up real quick. So here in the Streaming Wars segment of the show, we talk about anything interesting that's happening in the world of the Streaming Wars that we think you, our dear valued viewer or listener, might be interested in. You may ask yourself, what do you mean by streaming wars? What are you talking about? We're talking about all those various video streaming services that are now available. Whether we want to talk about Apple TV, whether we want to, although no one's talking about that, whether we want to talk about Hulu, Netflix, any of these really awesome services, even DC Universe that you might want to talk about. I've been giving the Peacock a lot of flack. Can you tell I haven't had a lot of sleep? A lot of flack. For when is it actually going to come out? That's usually my joke. It's like, oh, in the Peacock, if that thing ever comes out. Well, ironically enough, it did come out, didn't it, Eric?
Yes, it came out today, which is kind of a unique position. I don't think we've been in that position before where one of the new streaming services actually came out on the day of our broadcast.
Very cool. So anyhow, that's what we do in the Streaming Wars. We just talk about all those interesting things happening in the world of the Streaming Wars. So tell me, Eric, what do you have up first for this episode's installment of the Streaming Wars?
As I mentioned, this is the news. I mean, this is what's going on. We actually have a new service, a new player. Now, to be fair, Peacock has been available to certain cellular subscribers. I believe it's Comcast cellular subscribers. So there has been a version of Peacock that has been available. I haven't heard anything much about it because I don't know anybody that had access to it. So even though it has been out for I think a month and a half, maybe 2 months, I haven't heard anything about it. But now we have the new free version that's out. And so I thought it would be kind of neat to just kind of look at it. So I did have to set up an account before logging into this. So it's a little different. It doesn't look like, for instance, with like Pluto TV and Crackle, you can have an account, but you don't have to have an account to get into it. I believe with Peacock you do, because it didn't seem like I had an option to just start looking at stuff without first signing up. Now, the sign up doesn't ask for credit card information. It just asks for an email address and you set up a password. And it's my understanding that the reason for this is because one of the main ways that Peacock, especially the free version, is going to make money is its data collection. People should be aware of that by now. That's basically all your ad-based type platforms these days, whether it's YouTube, like I said, Crackle. That's why things like Crackle and Pluto TV do have accounts. It's so they can have targeted ads and things like that. That's basically what the entire internet is based on, is marketing stuff to you in a more direct fashion than, just blind. You get whatever ad you get. Although I always wonder how well that actually works, because I get all sorts of stupid ads on YouTube of stuff that I have no interest in. So I always wonder if their algorithms are broken or they just don't care and they're just going to send me whatever anyway. So I thought it would be fun to take a look at this. And as you can see, I've got it up right now, and we could see what's on this thing, because I have no idea what was going to be on this thing. I mean, I had some inkling. We can see here 30 Rock apparently is on it. What else have we got? This is an original, Dave, which I hadn't heard about. It says a Peacock original, Psych 2, Lassie Come Home. Have you heard of that, Dave?
No, I have not.
Well, let's just see. Can we watch this? I'm just going to click on it because I don't know what's free and what's not. So it comes up. It looks like we've got the description. I'm just going to try pressing the play button, and it looks like it says something went wrong. It says your video configuration is not compatible with Peacock. Try disconnecting an external monitor, which I don't have an external monitor. So it looks like we've got a technical glitch there. So let me try something else. Let's see if the site itself is just not working. But it does look like I was able to watch that if it was working. In other words, it looks like that is part of the free content. So we've got Jurassic Park. Let's see if we can watch Jurassic Park.
It might even be just because we're live streaming it, Eric. It might be some kind of a.
That's a good point. That's a good point. So again, this one looks like it's spooling. So I think Dave is hitting the money. He's hit the nail right on the head. But it does look like if I would have been able to get that if it wasn't for the fact that we're broadcasting right now. And that's basically what I'm trying to do. Is I'm trying to see which of this stuff is free and what stuff isn't. We've got like Downtown Abbey, Everybody Hates Chris, Project Blue Book, which is you're a fan of that, aren't you, Dave?
Well, the original version.
Oh, is this a new version or is this?
Yeah, they released a new version. I haven't seen any of the new one. I'm just mostly familiar with the original one from like the late 70s, early 80s.
Gotcha. So there's a lot of things here that obviously, this is an NBC Universal property. So stuff that's been on NBC television and stuff that's been Universal film or was produced by Universal. That's the kind of stuff that's on here. We do see that Battlestar Galactica is on here. And I'm just going to check that real quick. It does look like I would have been able to get that one. So that's kind of cool. So that's available there for free. Storage Wars. Actually, I'm familiar with that one. Let's see. We got films, featured films.
What about classic Battlestar Galactica? Can you watch classic Battlestar?
Why don't we search? See if we can. What happens when we search Battlestar? That's basically the point. This is my coverage, just to kind of show you what we got on here, and I don't see it. It all looks like the new stuff, the Ron Moore stuff. It doesn't look like classic BSG is at least on the free side.
See, isn't that ironic? Because that's what I've noticed with a lot of this stuff. It's like the stuff that people grew up with that they would want to rewatch. Sometimes that's the stuff that is actually behind the paywall, which is sometimes might seem weird because it's an older show.
Well, you know what's weird there is I'm pretty sure the NBC streaming service does have classic BSG. And I wonder if this is a case similar to DC Universe and HBO Max, where you have two different divisions fighting for content. That would kind of suck, wouldn't it?
It would be exhausting.
Yeah, because Buck Rogers is on the NBC one too. I just put it in and that's not popping up. And I know Buck Rogers is available on the NBC streaming service, which is free, by the way. We haven't really talked about that one a lot. It's kind of overlooked, and I think that's kind of deliberate on my part because I've been worrying about Peacock and what's going to be going on there. So that's kind of disappointing there, and it makes me think that we've got a similar thing going on to what we have with HBO Max and DC Universe, where basically the same company, different divisions, are fighting over content, which is disappointing because I thought Buck Rogers and Classic BSG would be on here for sure.
What about Quantum Leap?
That's a good one. Okay, Quantum Leap. Spell Quantum right?
I think so.
Quantum? Not showing up.
Yeah, let me do a search here real quick on my end.
If I do Leap, it should come up too. So, and you know what? That's another one that is on the NBC streaming service that again is available for free, but it doesn't look like it's on the free side of Peacock. Now, I wonder if it's on the pay side of Peacock too. You know what I mean? Like if maybe that's the case. Like I don't know if I can see the pay stuff on this. You know what I mean?
Well, see, it came up on my search that I could watch it for free on the NBC app.
Right. That's the NBC app I was talking about. That has Buck Rogers, Battlestar Galactica, Quantum Leap. Again, that's one that we haven't really talked a lot about. I don't think actually we've talked about it at all. But that's been around for, gosh, I think years now, that particular one.
Huh. Well, that's strange because ironically, the stuff that we can't find is the stuff I would be most interested actually to watch on the Peacock is the stuff that isn't there.
Yeah, that is weird, isn't it? Now, they do have some originals here. I have heard of Brave New World. Have you heard about that one?
No, I have not.
So
I just want to acknowledge. It looks like James is calling it a night. Good night, James. Thanks for being here and chatting and being part of the Rogues Gallery. We greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, good night. Thank you very much. I do appreciate you being here, and we always appreciate you guys commenting. So thank you very much for tuning in and actually being part of the show. But it does look like Brave New World is available, because that was one thing I was wondering was like, will the original content be available on this service? And it looks like at least that show is, which makes me hopeful that when the new Battlestar Galactica comes out, I'm hoping that it's available on the free side. I don't know if it's going to be or not. But as you can see, there is a lot of content on here, but we've already discovered there's some really big gaps that are not available that you would think would be no-brainers, right?
Yes, you would. You would think it would be a no-brainer.
Yeah, I'm kind of calling it. I'm calling it right now. You know, this is live breaking news from the Retro Rogues. I think we have a little bit of internal strife at NBC Universal, just like we do at AT&T. It's actually Comcast, right? It's Universal Comcast now, just like Time Warner is now basically AT&T. That kind of stuff I just don't understand. I really don't. I mean, I don't get it. It's like, how is the head of Comcast not saying, "Hey guys, you got to play right with each other"? I mean, I do the analogy with Star Trek. I mean, we just did a story last week that Star Trek is going to be on Pluto TV. Star Trek is on, Netflix. Star Trek is everywhere. And these are platforms that CBS doesn't necessarily even own. Heroes and Icons, that's a digital, broadcast channel. It has Star Trek. So it seems like they can play nice. They know what they have, and people want to see it. This is weird. Again, it totally reminds me of the situation with HBO Max and DC Universe. Very perplexing.
Yeah, it's a strange thing. It's all that previous agreement, because a lot of times with a lot of this material, a different company or a different group who want to invest in a property, they'll pay for something to be remastered, or they'll pay part of the price in order to get it released on a different media. If it was out in VHS and they want to make it available on DVD, sometimes they'll sell an interest, a right or a stake in that different property in order to help get those monies to get something into production. You see it all the time. So it's just crazy to think about that, but it's one of those things. Someone might have paid some money to do something with something, and so therefore legally, they have a right to some of this content, and it might explain why sometimes some of this stuff is on different services, even though it doesn't make any sense or it seems a bit vexing.
Yeah, the thing for me is like we're talking about the same company here. That's what's just so crazy to me. And we're talking about basically, Comcast is essentially competing with itself. I don't understand that. That's weird.
And yet it's so funny because we're seeing it right now because of all the complicated rights issues. We're seeing versions of that, that you've already pointed out that's happening at AT&T, Time Warner, whatever it is now. You see it with a lot of these different services. That's the thing I find the most interesting is that before they're launching this service, they don't seem to have all the ducks in a row. And it's like, well, I could see an executive being like, yeah, but this is 30, 40-year-old content. Who cares about original Battlestar Galactica as long as we get the new one on there? That's the one everybody wants to see again. Because sometimes those are how decisions are made. Some person in a meeting goes, yeah, but who cares about that? It just so blows my mind seeing how complicated, how tied up, and how just sort of convoluted all these rights issues have gotten with so many of these various properties.
It is weird. Again, especially when it's the same company. It's just different divisions.
Interesting. Are we good to go to another Streaming Wars story?
Absolutely.
All right, very cool. So this is my contribution for this episode. This is actually coming from Deadline. This actually came out, yesterday. I thought this was interesting. This story is by Mike Fleming. We're going to scan it here just a little bit, and then we'll talk about it. It says, Tom Hanks starrer Greyhound torpedoes Apple TV Plus opening weekend records. Got an image there of Tom Hanks from Greyhound. It says exclusive. Apple's World War II drama Greyhound, starring and written by Tom Hanks, has become the largest opening weekend release ever for Apple TV Plus, including series that have bowed on the service. Sources close to Apple tell Deadline. The streamer is loath in giving up exact numbers, but I'm told the film turned in a viewing audience commensurate with a summer theatrical box office hit, which of course Greyhound was meant to be, until it moved from Sony to Apple because of the uncertainty of movie theaters after COVID-19. Beyond generating the largest opening weekend ever for Apple TV Plus, 30% of its viewers were new to the service, and the film debuted last Friday. So you can read more about it here, but the general gist of it is just like it said. It's just that the film opened with a much larger audience share and performed much better than they had actually originally thought. To me, it kind of makes sense because, again, like I said, I mentioned that I'm playing a war in Europe, which is sort of like a really complicated version of Risk that actually is sort of a simulation of World War II. And amongst my group of friends I played this game with, there's been a lot of discussion about the film Greyhound and how excited they were, and a lot of them were actually looking forward to going and seeing it. And now a lot of them are not sure how they're even going to watch it. A matter of fact, one of the main members of our group told me point blank, actually, last Saturday, he said, I'm not signing up for some Apple TV Plus thing just to watch this movie. But apparently, a lot of people did.
Yeah.
So I just thought that's interesting to bring up. The fact that we typically give Apple TV Plus around here a lot of hell, and we don't. I typically don't think of the service very fondly. But here's an interesting positive story for Apple Plus TV. So what do you think, Eric?
Well, as you mentioned, we have been very critical of Apple TV. I think the only thing we both agreed on that we thought was interesting was the Snoopy show, and they didn't even promote that. Like we saw numerous articles where they wouldn't even mention the Snoopy show. I actually thought Ron D. Moore's series was going to have a better, a better following than it did. It doesn't seem like that did anything. The only show that did anything that I can recall is the I think it's the morning show, the one with Jennifer Aniston. That one got some buzz because I think it got some Golden Globe nods, maybe even won some awards. But I didn't care about it. Like it wasn't interesting to me at all. This I was interested in. I will say that. I like Tom Hanks as an actor. I think he does some great stuff. I was in the Navy Reserve, so this resonates with me as well because of that. Because the history of the Navy. This particular film is about the convoy system in the very early days of the battle in the Atlantic, which, by the way, the Battle of the Atlantic, in the United States was very suppressed. I mean, it's really crazy to think about it because literally you could be sitting in New York Harbor and you could watch their stories. You could actually see the ships burning, which gives me chills just talking about that. If you can imagine that, I've been in New York. If you can imagine, you're looking out in the harbor and you can see the ships burning that have been attacked by the German U-boats. It was really a crazy thing, and it didn't last for a long time. Once the convoy system came together, they were able to drive off most of those wolf packs. But for a time, it was in fact, my understanding is that basically the Germans ended up, killing more people and taking down more ships than the Japanese did in Pearl Harbor, and like I said, that part of history was very suppressed because they didn't want Americans to panic and realize, hey, we're losing the war on the Atlantic right now. The German subs, the wolf packs, were really causing a lot of havoc. So I did have interest in this. And like you mentioned, I haven't had real interest in anything else with Apple TV. So give them their kudos. And by the way, this is interesting because this film was meant to be a theatrical release. Apple didn't make this film. Sony made this film, and then Sony was like, oh, we can't put this anywhere. I guess they didn't want to do it in the drive-ins, which, by the way, I think it would have been cool if they had been able to actually do what Universal did with Trolls World Tour. Because Trolls World Tour, although it did come out on VOD, it also came out in the drive-ins. Like the local drive-in here actually had Trolls World Tour. So it would have been nice, I think, if they had done that with this. But I'm guessing Apple TV didn't, wanted an exclusive deal, so they wouldn't allow that. Because I probably would have thought about going to the drive-in and watching this. So I don't know if it'll get me to check out Apple TV though. That I don't know. Man of Sand mentions that Tom Hanks' name may have carried this particular film, but the reviews I read said it didn't have a very engaging plot and just went from one crisis scene to another. And I have heard a kind of a similar criticism, Man of Sand, where some buzz that there were people that saying it's really not that good of a movie. But I am interested in it.
Well, there you go, everybody. I just thought it'd be worth pointing out. Again, it's kind of interesting because it's a positive Apple TV Plus story. So I thought I would point that out.
Very cool.
Very cool.
Very cool.
Yeah.
We are always objective and journalistic on Retro Rogues Live.
Yep. That's what we try to do.
Especially in our streaming wars coverage.
Right. Are we good to go ahead and maybe segue over to our maybe our last topic for the evening?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well, I've got the graphic up here.
Let me get the banners up.
Awesome.
This is our Rogues Retrospective.
All right. So for the Rogue Retrospective tonight, we are talking about from 2003. We are talking about the film Underworld. So we're going to get the synopsis here just real quick. Synopsis is coming actually off of IMDb. Again, Underworld. Again, this film came out in 2003, and it is an R-rated film. We don't typically talk a lot about R-rated films on the show, but this is an R-rated film. So the synopsis, as it appears on IMDb, says, Celine, a vampire warrior, is entrenched in a conflict between vampires and werewolves, while falling in love with Michael, a human who is sought by werewolves for unknown reasons. So that's the synopsis they have here on IMDb. I feel like it could have been a little bit different than that, but we're just going to roll with it. This was directed by Lynn Wiseman. The writers are Kevin Garreau, Lynn Wiseman, and I can't remember the third writer's name. We'll get to that in a moment. The top billed cast obviously is Kate Beckinsale, Scott Speedman, Michael Sheen, Shane Burley, Bill Nighy, and the list goes on much further than that. You can find this information obviously on IMDb. So in order to do a Rogues retrospective, we have to first talk about how we first heard about the film. Now, Eric, this is a film you've seen before, so this is going to be a Rogues retrospective, correct?
Yeah, although I did want to address the fact that you and I had a little bit of a discussion. We didn't argue about it, but we did have a little bit of discussion about whether this is truly a retro film or not, and what is retro. Because I think that definition is kind of different for everybody sometimes. The question that I had was, is this film old enough to really be considered a retro film? And I know, Dave, you said that you thought it was, but I do want to kind of put that out there to the gallery. If anybody wants to comment, whether you think maybe is this do you consider this retro? Is 2003 retro enough? I did want to put that out there.
All right. Well, that's an interesting observation. We'll see what the Rogues Gallery has to say. So just to continue setting this up, obviously, in order to do a retrospective, we need to first talk about how we originally heard about the film and our initial impressions, having first seen it back in the day. And then we're going to talk about how we feel about the film today, also having recently rewatched it and, kind of making mental notes for things that don't work and things that don't work. And just discuss the film, obviously, in a retrospective. So, Eric, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
I can go first because I don't think I have a lot to say about how the film, back in the day was for me, because I remember seeing it. I saw it in the theater, and I remember liking it, and I remember thinking it was cool. But I don't remember being like blown away by it, where I was like, "Oh, this is the best film ever," that kind of a thing. And I think the biggest reason for that is I compare it to Blade, and I thought Blade was really, cutting edge and really kind of started like a lot of new ground with the vampire genre. What I do like about this is that it started a lot of the werewolf versus vampire. But the funny thing for me is, what I actually kind of thought this when I first saw it. I was all like, are they ripping off the real Ghostbusters? Because I don't know how much you were into that series, Dave, the real Ghostbusters, the Ghostbusters cartoon. But they actually had an episode that showed vampires and werewolves fighting each other. And that was the first time as a kid that I thought of the vampires and werewolves as natural enemies. Because, as a little kid, the monsters kind of always worked together. So, if you were a monster, you were all monsters, and you all kind of work together. There are old, Universal movies where you see that. The Wolfman is helping Dracula and things like that. So I the first time I came across the idea that werewolves and vampires would actually not like each other and be enemies was from the real Ghostbusters. So I remember thinking that when I saw this, which I think it's a cool idea. But I just remember thinking that, did they take that idea from the real Ghostbusters, or has that idea been around longer than I realized, or what? But that's kind of my impression from back then. I remember enjoying the movie. I liked it. Kate Beckinsale is fantastic in this movie. So that's kind of the impressions I had at the time.
So the way I originally heard about Underworld was actually just seeing the movie trailer in the theater. I just saw the trailer. I thought it looked kind of cool. When we get into the kind of the how we feel about the film today, we'll get a little bit further into it. But this film obviously was meant to hopefully pique the interest and bring in people who were watching Blade, but also people who had recently just seen The Matrix. It's kind of dripping with that style and ambiance, and very much has that sort of mood. Yet when you look at the movie poster there with Celine standing in front of the moon, you could also see where the Crow could guest star in this movie, and it wouldn't seem too out of place. So it does kind of sit within its own kind of unique thing. And I remembered seeing that first and noticing that even from that very first time I saw the trailers, I thought, oh, this looks interesting. So I remember going and seeing this in the movie theater, and I remember liking it quite a bit. I thought it was interesting. It brought back, kind of just a little bit before this movie came out, there used to be a very popular role-playing game called Vampire the Masquerade. And in order to play, at least maybe I'm thinking incorrectly, but I remember seeing a lot of people at conventions when they would play Vampire the Masquerade, they would basically be in character, essentially. And so during the course of like a convention, for example, they would actually be playing the game kind of in real time, interacting with other people. And what was kind of interesting about Vampire the Masquerade, because I knew friends who were really into it, they talked about all these different clans of vampires and all these different groups. And I thought it was so interesting when I went and saw Blade, they were exploring this concept. And they take that same concept again and they apply it to Underworld, but then they take it even further with what they do with the Lycans, which are the werewolves, and how they kind of integrate them into the world and the mythology. And the thing I thought was really, really cool about this film was that idea. Even having seen it back in the day, that was the thing I took away from it. I thought was really cool, is the idea of connecting kind of all these sort of disparate dots between vampires and werewolves, and how they may or may not kind of go together, in terms of storytelling. So I thought it was really cool back in the day, and I thought it was really interesting. And I quite liked the film, so much so that when it actually came out on DVD many years later, I ran out and bought it because I really liked it. I love this idea. It is very much a comic book sort of interpretation of vampires and werewolves. It's this movie very much to me kind of plays like a comic book adventure story when you look at all the action set pieces and how it's all put together. This film also shares an interesting connection too, because I delved into it and I watched all the behind the scenes stuff. This has an interesting connection that actually connects to another Bat themed character, which that character's name is actually Batman, because Patrick Tatopoulos, who actually designed the werewolves and a lot of the gadgets and everything in this film, actually also is the same person who designed the new Batmobile, worked on all the Bat gadgets for the Ben Affleck or the current DC expanded universe, DCEU, whatever. Anyhow, I've always been a fan of Patrick Tatopoulos' design work, actually going back to Stargate, the original Stargate film. And so it's like, oh, he's involved in this. It's really cool. But beyond that, he has an interesting connection, actually also going back actually to, or connecting actually to the current version of Batman, which I thought was interesting. So again, very, very fond of this film. Full disclosure, I have met and had several conversations with Kevin Grabeau, one of the creators of Underworld, and the gentleman who actually not only helped write this film, but he's actually in this film. He actually plays one of the werewolves, and he is as intimidating in real life, and that is his real voice. It is not augmented. He really sounds like that. When he talks, it's so crazy because his voice is so low, you can literally feel your chest rattling. It's crazy cool, but he is a real human being, and none of that's CGI. That's not augmented. He sounds like that. He looks like that. He is a very interesting, creative, and intimidating individual. Not because he means to be, but it's just his presence. You know what I mean? So I remember seeing it in the movie theater, like going, man, that guy, he's awesome, and he makes a really great kind of sort of foil for the vampires. But then you meet him in real life, and it's like, wow, he's just all that is just a part of him. He has that presence, which is really kind of cool. So I want to throw that out. So quite love this film. I know some people don't like it, but I've always quite loved this film. So that was my initial impressions for back in the day. So tell me, Eric, in order to complete the retrospective, we have to talk about how we feel about the film today. So tell me, having just recently rewatched Underworld, how do you feel about the film today?
Well, I agree with you that the central premise is like the the funnest part of the movie for me, probably. Besides actually looking at Kate Beckinsale, because she looks fantastic in this movie, and she's wearing a very very tight costume, which I appreciated quite a bit. But the central premise of the werewolves fighting the vampires is really the thing that resonates with me the most. We've seen it later. Obviously, we saw, some of us had girlfriends at the time and had to see Twilight. I'm just putting it out there. You know what I mean? So we've seen this happen in other properties that wasn't done, I would say, quite so well. But I talked to Dave. I sent him a message, about when I was watching this, and I said, Dave, you and I have to discuss, like, where are we on this? Are we team werewolf, or are we team vampire? Who do we really like resonate with us the most? That's what I thought about as I was watching it. Is like, do you feel you're more like a beast, and you're more like a werewolf, or do you feel like you're more like the sexy, sophisticated vampire? Because I'll put it out there, I feel like I'm a werewolf. That's just the bottom line.
Well, I do not consider myself sexy by any stretch of the imagination. And some people would tell,
but your wife.
But I think a lot of people would take offense to the idea that I am sophisticated. However, I personally myself, I feel like in this world I would probably click and fit in better with the vampires than necessarily the werewolves. And it's just it's a weird thing, because I love tradition, I love these ancient ideas, and I love the sort of the hierarchy and all this crazy stuff that they've established in this, which isn't really feudalistic necessarily, but this sort of hierarchy that they have established within the vampire, clans and all this kind of stuff. And there's when you see them get together, there's an air about them, like a pomp and a circumstance, and what do you want to call it? And there's a regality, is the way I would describe it. Almost, while not truly earned, I think, but in their minds, a nobility to the vampires, that they try to present, or how they see themselves in the film. So for me, I probably identify more with the vampires, because I think I would have more fun living in their world and being a part of that, sort of noble, idealistic, in terms of like a feudalistic idea anyway, of how their world kind of works. I could see myself fitting in with the vampires more easily than the werewolves, because the werewolves to me seem to be a little bit more rogue, for lack of a better word, more again, lone wolf. I mean, it almost sounds like a silly joke, but everything about them in the film, that kind of fits the idea that they are off on their own, doing their own thing, whatever they got to do to survive. That's where the werewolves are. And then the vampires are almost concerned as much with preserving this, whether it should be preserved or not, this heritage and this nobility that they think that they actually have. So in that sense, I think I probably see myself siding a little bit more with the vampires.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And even with your personality and all that stuff, it actually makes a lot of sense to me, because I do think of you as a sophisticated and knowledgeable person. So I can actually really see that. And I would say that, I always consider Dracula, who of course is, based on Vlad the Impaler, that basically that sort of regalness, that royalty, of Dracula being sort of the first vampire. It makes sense. It makes sense that that's the way they would be, that they would be kind of aristocratic, maybe better educated, all those kinds of things. And, conversely, one thing that I did notice as I was watching this is, while they did do a very decent job, I'm going to say, a very decent job of showing the contrast between the werewolves and the vampires. The vampires are living in a mansion. They're all very gothic. They're all very pretty. They're all, very good looking, all that kind of stuff. and definitely have that very sexy gothic vibe going on, which was very popular at the time. And I really do like that aesthetic. I've always kind of liked that. Kate Beckinsale, you can see, she's got the dark hair, even though she's very pale and everything like that. It's very gothic. You know what I mean? That's very vampire. One thing that I think would have been interesting is if they had done even a bigger contrast with the werewolves. In particular, the actor that you were talking about, I think he provides a little bit more of that contrast where he's very physical. And you think of werewolves being very physical and very driven by their animal instincts and things like that. And, I have actually been described as a lone wolf. It's a real thing. So actually, when I did my my psych exam for getting into the police force, that's something the psychologist said, hey, I really see this, and you need to be careful with it, because if you're too much of a lone wolf, you're not going to be successful in your career. And so, because you do have to work with other people, but at the same time, there's obviously a lot of situations where you're going to be alone. So it's good to have that. So it's kind of that balance, so I can relate to that personally. And that's, again, why I kind of relate to the werewolves. And I just think, sort of, watching this now, I think it would have been cool if they just actually even went farther with the divide between what the werewolves are, how they work, maybe much less organized. I mean, you get that sense, but there is a hierarchy that the werewolves have. And if I was doing like my own version of this, or if I was doing a werewolf vampire story, I think I really would sort of emphasize those contrasts. Like I think I would have the werewolves not really working together very well, that they would have that sort of lone wolf mentality, but also maybe some of that pack mind as well, where they could coordinate, but that wasn't necessarily what they like to do. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. So that's kind of what I think about when I watch it now is I like the contrast, but I would have taken it further. I think I would have taken it even further as the contrast between the very regal aristocratic, vampires, and the much more sort of base, blue collar werewolves.
Yeah, and that's sort of the things. Having recently revisited the film, overall, I'd say that the film holds up, relatively well. There's kind of a few shots kind of here and there that don't work quite as well. It's interesting too, because I don't think I quite saw the Matrix comparisons as much back in the day as I can see now. I mean, there's like literal shots lifted right out of the Matrix for this film. They're not hiding at all the idea that this film is influencing. Well, that's not the right word. Well, wherever I was going with that, it doesn't really make sense. But the point I'm making is that I feel like that watching the film now, it's just you can see the connections much closer to the Matrix than I think I saw back in the day. It's very kind of obvious. And I remember back in the day seeing the film and it didn't seem as obvious to me. But there's literal shots, actual literal shots. You can see the connections to Blade, more specifically, I think, sort of Blade 2. But it's interesting because I don't think Blade 2, let me check, because I don't think, no, Blade 2 had already come out. So this is pulling from a lot of, a lot of things. It's pretty obvious what they're pulling from. They are introducing their own elements, but you can obviously see influence from The Crow. I feel like the poster really draws influence from The Crow. And it's weird too, because not so much the movie per se as sort of like the artwork of James O'Barr from The Crow. It's but it's an interesting assemblage of all these different influences too, because it is its own unique thing. And even though this film came out after X-Men, I feel like that what they do with Scott Speedman's character later in the film, the ferocity that kind of comes out of his character and the way that he fights. I remember seeing that going, this is what they should have done with Wolverine. And then we kind of get this much later in Logan. So there's just a ferocity to him. I remember watching this film like, man, that's what they should have done with Wolverine. this film, to me, in the context of today, even seeing the seams where they're like going, well, we'll just lift that shot right out of the Matrix and we'll put that right there, and we'll just take these designs from Blade. You know, whether that is or isn't, and some of that goes into the idea of commerciality. You know, sometimes they go, well, to make the film more commercial, let's make it closer to a film that we know people like. So there's a lot of that going on too, because this film had a pretty sizable investment in it when you look at the effects and everything. But for me, I find that the film is a lot of fun. There's a few spots that I feel like, you know, it's showing its age a little bit, even though it's not that old. But there's a lot of really cool stuff in here that exists only in this film. I love that shot. There's a shot where Kate Beckinsale's character is trying to escape, and she's basically potentially going to get mauled by these werewolves. And that's that scene where she kind of spins around in a circle and uses the guns to cut the hole in the floor. Like, that's just kind of fun and cool, and it's very dance, you know, and it kind of fits her character, you know, the way that she moves. There's a lot of fun stuff in this movie, and I still feel the same way about this film today as I did back in the day, even though there's a few spots where I go, oh, I could see that now a little bit more, because I'm not as freshly connected to the film as I was back in the day. But I could see the comments about it's borrowing from this, it's borrowing from that. But that, I feel like too, that goes along with my comment I made before, that this feels like a fun comic book kind of movie, you know. In a comic book, if vampires and werewolves are going to go at each other, you know, this takes a lot of those kind of fun sort of comic book interpretation of that idea and puts it into a film live action. So in that sense, I think it has its own unique thing. And it's cool too, because they've made so many films out of this franchise and they kind of all sync up pretty well. And it's just kind of cool. So I still am quite fond of the film, having recently revisited it. I still think it's kind of fun. And I still think it's a worthwhile film to check out if you haven't seen it. That's my own personal take. So tell me, Eric, how do you feel about it? I mean, you just recently revisited. Do you think if someone's got a Saturday afternoon or something or whatever, and they're looking for something interesting to check out, because this is on Netflix, do you think this is a fun film that people might enjoy?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is a fun film that people might enjoy. I think I'm a little bit more critical than you are of it. I'll be honest, I wasn't totally looking forward to watching it at first, but once I got into it, because it has actually been a long time, I don't think I've seen this since I saw it in the theater, and I don't know. I feel like it's maybe Twilight. It's like two sides of it. So like Twilight kind of took the werewolf vampire thing and kind of made it a little bit lame, you know. I mean, I'm not a Twilight fan. You know, again, I had a girlfriend at the time. I had to watch it. And so I'm just not a fan of it. And then on the other side, it kind of, you know, it kind of set up Twilight in a sense because of the vampire werewolf thing. But on the other side, like you mentioned, it's very derivative, for me, more of Blade than even the Matrix. I mean, I think that Matrix style was sort of prevalent in all action movies of that time. Everybody was kind of trying to be the Matrix because that just kind of changed the way that actual cinematography was done. The way they actually shot action sequences was changed in many regards by the Matrix. But like style-wise and stuff, I do think it's derivative of Blade. So I'm kind of like in the middle. You know, on the one hand, I think they did way better than Twilight, and I like the central premise. And I think it's cool. I like the idea of werewolves versus vampires. Just on the face of it, I think it's a cool idea. And I think the execution was pretty good. Like they had the little idea that actually the werewolves used to be the slaves of the vampires, and they were the ones that protected them during the day. I thought that twist was kind of really neat, you know, as far as like monster lore and stuff like that, because I'm into lore, I'm into world building and things like that. So I really like that kind of stuff. So I will say, watching this, you know, going into it, I wasn't sure how I would feel, but watching it, I did get into it. I mean, I got into it again, and I really was enjoying it. It was a good experience to watch. And like I said, I just kept thinking about that, like you and me, and you know how people think of themselves and Are you more vampire? Are you more werewolf? That kind of thing. So the central premise works for me. I think the execution works for me. It's just that I do have to say that I think Blade really was a huge like inspiration for this movie, whether they're willing to admit it or not. And I don't really say that in a kind way because I think they kind of ripped some stuff off. I'll just put it out there.
Well, interesting. That's definitely an interesting take, and I can see a lot of what you're saying. But at the same point, I can also agree with a lot of what you're saying too, because I did kind of set that up, but I just always found this to be just a fun film to watch. I've always just thought it was a fun movie.
And I did think it was fun to watch. I mean, like I said, I wasn't sure how I was going to feel because I haven't watched in so long, and I did enjoy it. I had a good time watching it.
And this film is interesting too, because to me, it highlighted what I feel like are sometimes sort of the shortcomings, in my opinion anyway, of Warrior Nun, because they're taking so much time to get to the point where the character actually is going to do her abilities or train to do her abilities. And, with Selene and everything that's going on in this film, it's just a lot of fun because it's just action from the jump, and in a weird way, it highlighted, again, like I said, the shortcomings of Warrior Nun, that this is a well put together film, and it's very fast paced at times and does a lot of cool stuff. So like I said, I definitely, in closing for myself, I would definitely recommend. Can I say definitely again? Definitely I'd say again. Anyhow, a little too Rain Man. But I definitely would recommend this film if you have some time and you're looking for something different to watch. If you haven't seen it, or if you have seen it, you just haven't seen it in a little while. Give Underworld another shot. Take a look at it and see how you feel about it today. Sometimes some of these films, because of the time in which they come out, because they're too close maybe to the inspiration, that people look at and they go, oh, well, this is just a ripoff of this, or oh, this is just a knockoff of that. And a lot of times they pass over a lot of the interesting ideas that actually help it to be unique and stand out actually as a film. So I think Underworld's definitely worth revisiting and seeing how you feel about it today. At least that's my own personal opinion.
Yeah, I would say that if you like Twilight, Warrior Nun is for you. If you like Blade, Underworld is for you.
That's a good way to sum it up. I think that says it all right there, folks.
Yeah.
It's a quote Porky Pig. That's all, folks.
Right on.
All right. Are we good to go to the outro?
Yeah. I think we're good to go.
All right. Very cool. So I want to thank you for watching or hopefully listening to this episode of the Retro Rogues Live. Again, my name is Dave Beatty. I have been one of your hosts. You can learn more about the show. You can learn more about me. You can see a lot of my artwork. You can read my bio, all that kind of fun stuff. Although you can't find a link yet to KirbyTees.com, but that will be forthcoming. But you can see more of my artwork and learn more about me, as well as watch links to a lot of the shows that are hosted on YouTube. And then there's the KirbyTees.com right there. So I'm going to push this first, and then we'll push the other one second. So we want to encourage you, if you enjoy the Retro Rogue show, or if you're just curious to see what we got going on in terms of the merchandise side, some of the things we have that are available, please check out KirbyTees.com. That's KIRBYTS.com. And I also want to encourage you to go check out DaveBeatty.com. That's the official home for the Retro Rogues Live show. And you can learn and see all kinds of things there too. And again, that's www.davebeaty.com. I want to thank my co-host, Mr. Eric Alexander, to be on here and offer his interesting opinion. We won't hold it against him that he seems to think he's a werewolf. So, Eric, please tell the folks where they can learn more about you on the interwebs.
Well, I am most active on Twitter, and you can find me there at BassGod14. You can see that. That's my name right here, at BASSGOD14. That's also my Twitch account, which is the official Twitch for the Retro Rogues. That's also my YouTube, which is the official YouTube for the Retro Rogues. My DMs are always open on Twitter. I'm always open to suggestions, especially when it comes to reviewing new content. Or just to talk about stuff, just because, I geek out on a lot of this stuff just like anybody else. And I always enjoy a good discussion about Star Trek, Star Wars, any of that stuff. Just don't get personal and don't call me names. That's all I ask. And I want to go back to an earlier comment that we weren't able to share. And this is from Jane when we were talking about, you know, the old era of the drive-ins back in the day when they had those little speakers that you had to put in the car. And she related a story, and she said a friend took me to drive-in and she forgot the speaker was in the back window. She took off and broke the window out. And so with that, we will leave our viewers with the last word.